You're a rock
Thank
star.
you,
Thank you.
Matthew. I was
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I was playing in the chat.
Nice. Okay, so just a couple housekeeping items for this morning because the way I facilitate this conversation is exactly the way I did yesterday's. My style doesn't change. It's a lot of, like a slide, a comment, a prompt, a question. It'll give everyone a chance to participate to your maximum comfort level. Uh, One thing I will add is that just so nobody gets offended or bothered because it's not well, it's on purpose, but it's not intentional to offend anyone, is that if I reach a point where I feel like, okay, we've done enough discussion, there may be moments where I actually, even though someone's hand is up, that I pass on that hand, but I will call that out and say we need to move forward. And so just so everyone's cool with that. All right. So this is my second and equally favorite topic to discuss, which is, it's called a lot of things, but basically boundaries and ethics. And the reason why I love this topic as much as I do the co-occurring is because in my 30 years of attending boundaries and ethics classes, um, let's see, how do I say this with less judgment? I can't. A lot of people that present on this topic present it very wrong, period. And what I mean by that is a traditional boundaries and ethics class is a class telling you of all the stuff you can't do and all the fear you have about the people we serve and liability and getting sued and all that stuff. In most classes, you literally get just a page full of all the shit you don't do. And a lot of the stuff people say don't do is actually not accurate either. And so this is why I started presenting on this topic is really to demystify the differences in approaches and organization. That's one piece. Two is to actually tell you that the truth in most situations is the right answer is it depends. And so what I mean by that is when someone asks, well, here's a situation, it's a vignette, here's a situation I was in, or I've seen, or I've heard, what would you do? Now, the accurate answer in most situations is it depends. It depends on my job, it depends on where I work, it depends on a multitude of factors. And so that's actually the truth. Now, having said that, as we go through this, there are a handful of things that it doesn't matter where you work, it doesn't matter. You could have the most powerful God, more powerful than anybody else's God, and that God cannot save you from the wrath of the organization or credentialing body. There are a handful of items, very small. And when I say handful, I'm saying literally only a few items that it doesn't matter where you work, what you believe, how you feel, you'd lose your job or credential. But other than that, the accurate answer is it depends. And then the third piece on why I love this is I'm not here to teach you what to think, but I will walk you through a format on how to make really amazing decisions all within seconds that if this model resonates with you. And there's going to be two slides that I'll remind you as we go through that if this model resonates with you for a way to make decisions, then I would encourage you to print these two slides out, one of the two slides, and actually keep it with you at all times as you to build up. It's like to practice using this. So that's my overview for today. So we're doing professional boundaries and ethics using the 5 factors. And the 5 factors we're going to go through. We're going to spend time on each factor. We're going to be looking at the Medi-Cal Peer Specialist Code of Ethics so I can point out a few things. We're going to do it. It's going to be really interactive today. So let's rock and roll. So here's what I hope you get, other than what I already said, which is it depends. is this, that that we all can self-reflect and identify that we're human beings, no matter how hard we try. And I say good luck with it. Oh, Stephanie, that dog looks so cool. I love it. No, keep the dog in the picture. It makes me happy. Is that we all are human beings. We all go through stuff, and no matter how hard we try to separate it and to be consistent with that, that when we show up, we're completely devoid of any personal stuff going on. Good luck with doing that consistently. But we go through stuff, and sometimes the stuff we're going through, sometimes our reactions to specific situations cause us to make less than optimal decisions. Welcome to being human. Is anyone AI in here? Anyone artificial intelligence? No, you look all human. Okay, cool. All right. So these two go together. We will walk through each factor. So I'm hoping that you would be able to cite, reference, name each of the 5 factors and how that factor gets applied in decision making. So, and then here's a huge one. To truly understand the distinction between what really is unethical, period, versus what makes you feel uncomfortable. So congratulations, you're going to feel uncomfortable at any given moment in this field. But just because you're uncomfortable with something or you disagree with acting in a certain way, here's the distinction. It does not mean that it's unethical to act in a different way than you think. That distinction makes sense thus far? So
Yeah.
where it might be okay to act in a different way than you think at one place, that's okay. You're uncomfortable, but it doesn't make it unethical. And this is one of those sweeping statements that I hear all the time is that's unethical, that's unethical, that's unethical. And it's like, no, you're just uncomfortable. And it's okay to be uncomfortable. All right. And so we're going to spend the most amount of time around the ethics specific portion. All right. So you ready for the big real reveal? We're going to go through and I'm going to use a couple real basic examples to reference the 5 factors as we walk through it. All right. Do I see a drum roll? Anybody a drummer in here? There we go. Thank you, Javier. I saw that. All right. Here's the first factor. Member preference, member, people we serve, client, whichever terminology you want to use. But for the purposes of today, member is the term that I'm most familiar with, that I've used the most. So in member preference, this is the one that my observation on our system is that we spend the least amount of time considering. This is the one that we bypass the quickest. And if we take yesterday's topic as an example, and how most people that show up at behavioral health, like myself when I have, I'm showing up because I'm really in a bad spot. I'm not showing up at behavioral health because I got my shit together and I'm like, oh, I want to hang out with a bunch of other people that are struggling, and I really like that crappy coffee and the horrible surroundings and security guards. I don't like any of that stuff, but I'm here because I'm not doing well, right? And so, and then what I find as a member, as a client of services is the agency really doesn't care about that. And what I mean is they don't embrace us for who we are in this moment or where we're at. Every organization will say in some variation, we meet people where they are. We're person centered. And I call bullshit most of the time because, and what I mean is, if a client member shows up and they're very upset and they're not even mad at us, but they're just mad at the system, they're mad at the world, and they're cussing and they're pointing their finger at us, a lot of organizations will kick them out. And that's what I'm talking about. They'll tell them, you need to leave. You can't talk to me this way. You can't do this. And what I advocate for is maybe that's the person we need to embrace more. That's just my thoughts on it. It's easy to work with someone I but maybe we should try harder to work with people that it's difficult to, kind of thing. And so that's what I mean. We spend the least amount of time truly considering the plight, the nature, the status of the members we serve. So the first preference is member preference. Generally speaking, this is where everything begins. A member comes into the agency, they make a statement, they have a request, they want something they want to work on, they want to participate in some part. This is where, when we break down member preference, we'll really go through all these aspects. So in this case, to show you how this model works, this member comes in and they would like a hug. Okay. They're like, it doesn't matter the reason. Maybe it's just the way they greet people. Maybe they're not doing well, but the member comes in and would like a hug. So the first thing I encourage people to ask ourselves is the ethical question. Is there a policy at my agency that says I cannot hug? Or is there a policy that says hug away if you choose? So the member comes in and asks for a hug. The first thing we ask is there someone, here's the simple version of ethics, is there someone or something that can take my job or my credentials if I hug this person? Does that make sense for people? All right. So at Project Return, I should actually do a pop quiz right now for Renee or Helen, but I won't put you on the spot. At Project Return, we're allowed to hug people. Okay, so what I expect an employee to ask ourselves at Project Return is this. A member comes in and says, can I have a hug? The staff, the first thing they ask is there a policy, a rule against hugging? At Project Return, the answer is no. Hug away. All right. So now I'm going to consider my personal boundaries. Now, I'm going to make a case later that our personal boundaries are double-edged swords, right? They're both they have positive and negative impacts on them. So let's use the hugging still as an example. Member comes in and asks for a hug. We should rightfully consider that. The question at Project Return is already answered. Hug if you so choose. Now it's left to the staff to decide whether or not they're going to hug this person or not. Right? Now, for me, I'm a damn hugger. I'll hug a tree stump, I'll hug a cat, a dog, a child, whatever. It doesn't matter. I'll hug people. It's how I was raised. So I will hug the person at that point. So I want you guys to see that I have made the decision to hug based on personal boundaries, but the first thing I consider is there a rule against hugging? Because if there's a rule against hugging, it doesn't matter what I feel. It really doesn't matter. What I would communicate at that point is, you know what? I really don't mind hugging people. We have a policy against hugging here at this organization. So can we do a fist bump, an elbow bump, a handshake, whatever, right? So the decision at that point will be made based on ethics, because if I hug the person, I'm going to get in trouble. And I like my job. I get paid $6 an hour. I need that $6 an hour. So does that make sense so far to people? Beautiful. All right. So then the fourth factor is, what does my job description, what's my role at the organization? What does my supervisor have to say about these things? What do they expect of me? So now I'm going to use a different example to show you how the decision might get made here instead of the other places. So I'm going to start with job role responsibilities. So I'm a housing specialist at an organization. So I help people get housing. The member comes in and says, "Hey, can can you help me with Social Security benefits application? I'm just throwing an example out there. The ethics say, well, the ethics want us to operate within our scope of practice. Now, having said that, helping someone with an application is not technically outside of our scope of practice. Because what we mean by scope of practice is, as a peer supporter, we don't diagnose, we don't, we're not doing therapy, we're not doing like counseling, what people would call peer therapy, peer counseling, things like that. What we're doing is we're doing these things. So it's perfectly reasonable that at some organizations, someone would do benefits applications, housing applications, employment applications, and things like that because they're generalists. They do a lot of stuff. But at some organizations, this, not mine, but this one that I'm using, the member comes in and asks, helps with the benefit applications. There's nothing really ethical to consider. My personal boundaries are I like to help anybody that asks. But my boss, my job role responsibilities, they don't like me doing benefit applications. You know why? Because we have other people that can do that, and I'm a housing specialist. So I would communicate the no at that point and say, I'm not really supposed to do benefits applications. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a warm handoff to someone else within the organization that actually specializes in that. So see how the decision's been made based on that now. And then the final one is team treatment considerations. This is where, if for those of you that work in the field, you're going to be familiar with this. Those of you that don't, hopefully you become familiar with it. But a lot of teams will meet, say, on a weekly basis, gather together, and part of that meeting is to discuss member care. Or in a traditional setting, they like to call it case consultations. I hate that terminology, but nonetheless, we're talking about providing services to a specific member. And so sometimes we will band together in a unified way and make decisions to the benefit of the member in theory. And it might even go against sometimes what the member wants, and we would communicate that. So I'm going to pause because we're going to break down each of these factors. But just to check in with everyone, does that simple overview make enough sense? Are there any questions, comments? Beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to give you another example then, just to walk through this, rattle through it real quick.
Guyton,
Yeah.
I have a quick question. It's Ariane.
Yes. Oh,
This
I'm looking for you. There you go, Ariane. Yeah.
the 5-factor, just in consideration of the exam and the fact that there's 70 principles or something that we have to know, and I'm trying to take accurate, copious notes to really
Yeah.
focus my attention.
Yeah.
And so is this 5-factor decision-making model in the ethics for our peer support kind of standard operating procedure for Cal Mesa, or is this just what is being advocated as a professional practice for us to have and take with us?
Wonderful question. Ariane, right? Did I get it?
Yes.
Beautiful, Ariane. Okay. Technically speaking, the test will not include anything related specifically to the 5 factors. Now, having said that, I'm gonna show you how using the 5 factors can help guide you in even the test taking when you get to these ethical dilemmas. So it's really meant to advocate for a model to think through these scenarios, but you're not going to get any questions specific about the 5 factors. Does that help you? Beautiful. Thank you. Great question. Okay, so here's another example. I'm going to, at one agency, it was required that we drive people in our personal car. Required. It wasn't a matter of debate. It was part of our job description. Everyone had to do it. 1-to-1 with the members in our personal car. All right, so member comes in and says, hey, can you give me a ride to fill in the blank? the ethical question is, does the agency have a policy about driving people in our car? So at that agency, the answer was yes, you will drive people in your car. Congratulations. My personal boundaries don't matter. I can feel uncomfortable driving people in my car. I probably won't have a job there for long unless I get over that discomfort, right? So then the job role responsibilities plays in too. Like, is this okay? Is this a valid opportunity to give someone a ride? Or maybe the member, team treatment considerations, maybe the member has created scenarios of this specific member where people, more than one staff, are concerned about their safety, right? Driving this person in their car. So at any given point, that one request will land in a different direction. Does that make sense to people? So just because we're required to drive people in our car didn't mean that we had to say yes to everyone. There's a distinction there. So that's just another example. All right. So let's get into member preference, beautiful peoples. And so once again, this is that one that I found we spend the least amount of time. And I'll give you one very specific example that actually two that I found really troubling and actually changed at one organization. So I got hired at this one organization to oversee 300 shelter beds, 3 different locations. And you're not going to be surprised by the amount of rules that they had at the shelter. So if raise your hand if you've ever went to a shelter, worked at a shelter, tried to connect people to a shelter, and you're like, wow, there's like 40 rules, and wonder why people are like, I don't want to go to the shelter, right? So that was an example of all these rules were in place. And I remember getting the job and I'm like, that's a lot of rules. And I was curious initially, like, can staff even follow these rules? And the answer was no. I'm like, shit, you'd all get kicked out of here. So why the rules? And their statement was safety, this and that. And I said, well, we're gonna eliminate all the rules. We're gonna narrow it down to 4 principles. And so, like, a couple things, big things that changed. One is people were allowed to come in intoxicated and everything like that. 2 is we stopped searching everybody's bags every damn day. And 3, we knew people had weapons. And so what we would ask, instead of kicking people out because they actually had a weapon because they were unhoused and it would make sense that you would want to protect yourself, we said, just give us the weapon during the day while you're here or whatever, and we'll lock it up, kind of thing. And so our rules took into consideration more the people we were serving. And then what was ironic is we actually found we were kicking people out less for just really stupid things. And so that's an example of considering the members in it. The other thing was I would ask staff, why are we having people line up at 6 o'clock in the morning? We can't even get staff here on time. Like, with a population that is a group of people that are in more chaos than I'm going through in my house, and I can't show up on time, but they have to, like, help that make sense. And so we would modify things like that. Does that make sense to people? Just a couple examples. All right. So here's member preference. And trip on this. The people we serve are human beings. So hopefully our boundaries, our limitations, our no's are not set unilaterally. Hopefully, meaning that we don't just walk around going, yes, no, maybe, hell no, forget you. Yes, hopefully we're not just walking around setting all this stuff without considering the person. Hopefully, every time we say a yes, a no, a maybe, that we're considering the member that's in front of us. Hopefully. that we pause and reflect on that. Hopefully, we're avoiding mentalism. And mentalism, a simple version, is looking at the person as being disabled and all their behaviors are a manifestation of a diagnosis and disability. The opposite of this is hopefully we're looking at people as people first that just might be going through something. Does that distinction make sense? It's the glasses we look through color our world. If I see all disability, I will then treat the person as disabled, and I'm going to bypass looking at them as a human being that just might be experiencing something. The members we serve, they have personal values, and those values actually might be in conflict with ours, but they have them. So hopefully we're considering them. The people we serve also have boundaries themselves. So hopefully we're considering their boundaries. Maybe they don't like to hug. Maybe they like to hug. Maybe they don't like direct feedback. Maybe they don't like direct eye contact. Maybe they do. So hopefully when we're working with someone, we're actually considering their boundaries too, and not just walking around imposing ours on them. They also have preferences in terms of the way we interact with them. Hopefully we're considering that. Again, you know how I shared yesterday, I'm a big cusser. And but if I'm working with a member that doesn't appreciate that language, then I'm going to consider that. Now, to be honest with you, in a large group like this, there's just too many people to consider everyone, right? And so that's why in a group like this, I'll cuss away, whether you like it or not, because I can't accommodate for all, but I will let you know in advance. But if I'm working one-to-one with someone, I'm going to consider their preferences because I have no desire to create unnecessary conflict with the person. I have no desire. Touch, handshakes, hugs, fist bumps, things like that. Hopefully we're considering that. In a parallel universe, I share with you, I coach high school boys and I also train kids. And I have a standard greeting that I kind of do with most kids. And you can see how this applies outside of this realm too. And it's like a really nice clap and then on the shoulder, right? And the kids, they get all excited when you get that really loud clap that like hurts your ears. It just happened last night at practice. And so, but there's some kids that they don't do that. They walk up and they're all, hey, coach, you know, and it's like, so I honor that. I'm not going to make them do it my way. So it's a variable because I'm not going to make someone greet me in the way that I expect. I want to greet them in the way that they expect. Hopefully you have flexibility in terms of where you can meet with people. I will say in my career, the best interactions I've had with people have actually been outside of my office. Meaning it could be taking a walk down the street. Hey, you want to, you know, because the cool thing is I can learn a lot by someone walking down the street and then come back and do my documentation. I can learn a lot. And so what I learned to do was to offer people, hey, I would even say it like this early on. Look it, you know we love doing intakes and assessments, and I've got to do our stupid version of it. The question I have for you is where would you prefer that we do this? Because I already know the questions in my head, especially after asking them enough times. Do you want to go to do you want to take a walk? You want to go to the park? It's like Dr. Seuss. Do you want to go sit at the coffee house? It's like, where would you feel more comfortable doing this? Now, I had flexibility to do that. At Project Return, our staff have flexibility. They don't have to meet in this chair at that desk at this time. People can walk and talk and go across the street. I have weekly supervision with the staff that I supervise. We go to the park across the street from the office every week. And you know, that's an offer. You want to go across the street? It's really nice out today. So if you looked at my office, there's nothing magical in here that makes the interactions more effective. And then would they prefer a different staff? This one's complicated, but again, we're considering these things. So in some environments, this would be more challenging to pull off, meaning for whatever reason, a member doesn't like me. And that's happened. That's okay. And in one environment I worked at, every 6 months, members would go through what we would call open enrollment, where they can submit a formal request of I would prefer to work with that staff and or that staff and or that staff. And then we would compile all that information and make adjustments to our member list, as we called it. So we would always consider the members' request or preference. It didn't mean we could always meet it. But remember, these are member preferences, and people don't always get what they want. But I will say that considering what the member wants is a game changer. I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions or comments. Ruth.
Thank you. I absolutely love this because this is like what we face with medical care, like dental care, any kind of system of care. It's
Yeah.
it's actually harmful for people, you know, and what was the other thing I wanted to say? Oh, about the shelters. I worked with a woman who she got a job, but it took her like 2.5 hours to get to the job by bus and to get back. And so
Yeah.
she got back 3 times after the curfew and they kicked her out and kept all of her stuff too. And
Yeah.
it's like she's doing what she's supposed to do to get, you know, move forward and get out of the shelter. Another friend of mine was possibly going to have to go into a shelter and she was going to be separated from her son because he was 12 years old and they won't
Yeah.
allow a mother and son to stay together if the son is 12 or older. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Like, so they're splitting up families and then expecting people to act right, you know? I mean,
Yes. Yeah. And to be okay with it. Yeah. Oh,
well,
yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
to be, you know, to follow the rules and behave properly. Well, if you're traumatizing somebody like that, there's no way they can do that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless that's their trauma response is fawning or something, then they're going to go along with it. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
thank
Thank you for that, Ruth. You reminded me of another really specific example related to the shelters. So they had a rule that you had to be in at night. I think it was like 10 o'clock, and it's been a while. And okay, so we had we called them guests at the shelter. So they got a job, and it was graveyard shift. And the staff said, well, you can't stay here if you're going to work graveyard because we have a rule. You have to be in at 10. And then the member complained, the guest, and came to me. And so I looked at it and I went to the staff. I said, but that's our rule. Well, yeah, that's the rules. And I said, but they got a job. Yeah, but that's the rules. Yeah, but that's our rule. Yeah, but they have to go along with it. Like, but we can change that rule for this person. We could just let them sleep during the day. We actually could do that because it's our damn rule.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
amazing because this
yeah,
shelter, it was like you had to be out by 6 a.m. and you had to
yeah,
be back in by 9. And
yeah.
yeah,
Same at this shelter, but we changed it for that person because most people don't get graveyard shift. But I said,
right.
look at this is we created this. We could actually modify it. And
Yeah.
so absolutely. So actually that person got that job, kept that job, and we let them sleep during the day because I made the staff get over their damn selves and say, this is just a stupid rule we created. Yeah. That actually applies to most, right? But
Sure.
not everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. And are we helping people get on their feet or are we keeping them down? You know?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, because we don't want you to get a job. Yeah, it will better your life because of our rule. Yeah, thank you for that, Ruth. Carlos,
Yeah, good morning, everybody.
good
Good
morning.
morning. That everything you're discussing in how to implement it, I think it comes because of your own experience. You know, it's very unfortunate when you go to certain locations, certain shelters, certain programs, and it's being run by someone that has never been in someone in their shoes, and they're so strict about it. It needs to get like this, bro. No, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
Prime example, like when most military personnel they get out, they're the biggest issue. Like you need to be on time. This is not your company.
yeah,
We don't have a set of a standard baseline. As long as you don't mess up enough, I can't fire you. You
yeah,
can be the most productive. You can be the least productive. Guess what? You still get paid the same.
yeah,
You know.
yeah,
But I think
yeah,
for everything you have implemented so far, it's because you have lived through it, and like this is how I would like to get treated. This will
yeah,
benefit me, and
yeah,
I can't impose my way of how the road's supposed to work on
yeah,
someone else. Like you're right, they're in different
yeah,
stages, so we do
yeah,
recognize those things. Make I think it goes back to you said it earlier. Make them human. They're a human
yeah,
being just trying
yeah.
to get along, and we need to acknowledge the fact, like, hey, we need to be there for them as support, not impede their success. That's so. Thank
Exactly. Yeah, thank you, Carlos. And I do think that lived experience can be helpful. That mirrors the harm reduction kind of model. I have seen this weird thing too, is where that lived experience can backfire. And what I mean by this is, especially like in more rigid environments, it's like, well, I needed that rigidity. And I'm like, well, okay, you needed that rigidity. That's cool. Everyone's not you. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
what work for
yeah,
me doesn't mean that work for the next
yeah,
individual,
yeah,
or the whole belief like, well, they need to suffer. No, let them. They're not you. They're
yeah,
not you. Need to get off your high horse. This is a completely
yeah,
different individual. Meet
yeah,
them where they're at, which has been covered before,
yeah,
and don't believe that well, my way is the only way. No, there isn't. There's many.
correct.
We have heard it before. There's many ways to skin the cat.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that, Carlos. Appreciate it, buddy. Angelina.
Yeah, it's just maybe a silly example, but it reminds me of that movie with Robin Williams where he walks with Good Will Hunting, I think the movie where
Yes.
he walks to the park with him and makes him feel human and
Yeah.
finally like said nobody can get to him because he's so smart.
Yeah.
But so thank you for bringing the empathy. I think that a lot of people are legalistic and just don't know how to connect with people because they have no clue what that person's undergone or the stigma or the judgment. And so, yeah, thank you. That's
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you, Angelina. All right. So there are two statements that I will encourage all of us to eradicate from our vernacular, our language, and this is how it applies to member preference. So here's actually a couple statements I've heard over the years. I've actually said over the years, and I just fundamentally disagree with them. Here it is. Here's the first one is, well, if I do this for one, I have to do it for all. I encourage us to never use that. It's not even human or practical. And what I mean by that is I want to go back to that example that Ruth and I were discussing. So we had a general rule at the shelter that actually applied to most, and it made sense because most people don't work graveyard. But then we were presented with a unique situation where a person got a job working graveyard, which there's nothing wrong with that. And the only barrier was a rule that we created. So what did I make our staff do? Break that rule for this person. Now, we did not allow people just to go willy-nilly, go hang out at the bar till 2 a.m. and come in. That was not generally allowed. Though if we had someone that was in a specific situation that every now and then came in late like that, we weren't going to just kick them out. So what that required us to do is to actually be more flexible with what we did based on the individual instead of applying an across the board rule to all. Does that make sense? So if I do for one, I do for all. Here's the other thing. We don't all need the same thing. We don't all want the same things. And if I'm focusing on treating everyone the same, I'm missing treating everyone as an individual. Whether you agree with that statement or not, does that distinction make sense? All right, here's the other statement I encourage us is this is I'll meet you halfway. I'll meet you halfway. I'll do 50-50. Again, that's not actually reflective of our human experience. Sometimes we are doing 90% for someone because they need 90%, while later on we're doing 10% and they're doing 90%. And that mirrors our real life. I'm married, and we're not always 50-50. There's sometimes I'm doing 20 and she's doing 80, and vice versa. If I stick to this 50-50 rule, I'm negating my wife's experience sometimes where the best she can do. And I'll give you an example. She had postpartum depression with our first child. And she called me and I was like, oh shit, it changed. It was a life changer. I came home, and from that day forward, I was like I took care of the kids every night. I got home from work on time. I focused on that. I gave her break. Everything was fine. When it came to that, I was pulling 80% and my wife was doing 20. And now I get to chill out and she does 90 and I do 10, and I'm a sitcom dad that's a dumbass. So my point is that we miss the interpersonal dynamics if we're focused on such rigid application of stuff. I'll meet you halfway. If I do it for one, I do it for all. Again, that might be comforting for me because that creates some safety for me, some consistency, but it may not be beneficial for them. So again, whether you agree with that or not, do those two examples make sense?
Yeah.
Give you something to chew on that you can ignore. All right. So that's member preference. Any comments or questions about member preference?
I do. This is Ariane.
Yes, Ariane.
I am really nervous to speak up and speak out, but I'm just gonna say something. So
Yeah.
right now there's a thing going on in the chat where one of our cohort members, Yolanda, was interacting with the class by sharing helpful information. And Helen decided to remove her from the class and then broadcast a message that was supposed to be individually sent to Yolanda to the entire class. And I'm reading this member preference and these professional boundaries and ethics that we're being encouraged to have and practice, you know, in the positions that we have to the individuals that we're supporting. And I'm seeing that none of those principles are being practiced right now by our leaders.
Thank
You
you.
can
Ariane.
use my name. It's fine to use my name,
Oh,
and
I
I'll jump
did.
in.
I totally
And-
did use your name.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
no, that's
Leadership
fine.
comes responsibility.
Yes, and also remember reviewing our guidelines, the guidelines for class, and one is respect.
Yeah.
I don't
but
think she was
I'm-
being disrespectful. I think she was just informing us. I get your point of view, but I feel like it's a little micromanaging
Absolutely.
Okay.
because I
Okay.
left my camera for literally 2 minutes because my manager and director came and I already got like a message like host, like I always have my camera on. And I
Okay.
don't think that was fair to put that for everybody to see. It was kind of belittling.
No, that was a complete accident. We had been going back and forth. It was my third request to wait until the break, and I was not getting any response. So,
I guess I'm
but-
still just kind of looking at the member preference bullet points of the
Mhm.
principles that we're being encouraged to learn to practice as a professional. And I'm not seeing those being reflected in the interaction that's happening right now.
I'm actually gonna jump in.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Because and I'm not taking a side, but for the interest of this topic, and also just trying to move forward a little bit too. Remember, we do consider the member preference, right? It doesn't mean the member always gets what they want. There is a distinction in that. And there are times that guidelines supersede in these five. Remember, these are 5 factors. We're only talking about member preference right now. The member can ask for the sun, but they might only get the moon. And so again, I'm not defending any side, but I am saying this is just one factor. We don't consider things based only on one factor. That's the purpose of today, is to look at, okay, right now we're talking specifically about member preference. But remember, a member can come in and ask for a hug, and I might not give them a hug, either because the agency doesn't allow it, or I don't like hugging people. And so we're looking at this, but we're breaking each factor down in isolation so we can do that. Does that help with that, everyone?
It still doesn't feel like we're practicing the principles, that leadership isn't reflecting the principles they're encouraging us to practice. And it's almost like the exact examples that you've been sharing this entire time about the things that you've learned and experienced being a member yourself through experiences, and then taking that and trying to practice the principles in
Yeah.
a better way to,
There-
to just for fidelity. It just doesn't feel like that's being reflected in the leadership in this experience. And I'm
And
just
this is-
voicing,
Yeah.
I'm just speaking up and speaking out.
Yeah, and this is where, Arian, it's a valid observation. But again, I want to stay on this topic because we're looking through the 5 factors in terms of service delivery and everything like that. And then, again, the other piece is we haven't gotten to the other factors. Let's say, for example, in this class, there's a bigger priority on one of the factors, like team treatment considerations would be an example. It doesn't matter what the member wants. The team has decided that this is the decision we're making. And so I appreciate it. And I'm not even trying to shut you down. I'm trying to provide additional context that this is why we're breaking down each factor, because we want to consider member preference, but it doesn't mean the member always get what they want. As we go through this, that will be revealed more. So I am going to move forward because, but I think the feedback is valid. I know Helen and Renee will consider it, and yeah. So any other questions or comments about member preference that doesn't relate to the classroom example for now? Carlos.
I think you covered it. The whole fact about you talk about splitting 50-50, but those 50-50 might be different. Like you
Yeah.
mentioned, my 50-50 today might be 10%. That's what I can give you. And
Yeah.
if that's what I can give you, that's what you can expect. That means that you're supposed to be able to be prepared. Like, I will cover the other 40. I got you
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
But it might be vice versa. But also, if it gets to the point, you should also learn when to pull back.
Yes.
Like, yes,
Yeah.
I am here to support you, but mentally I can't. Can so and so fill in for me?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
just something that
It's
came up right now.
it's great. Yes. There's a statement in different fields that I think really resonates with what you were saying, Carlos, is that the best discharge from an organization or services actually happens at intake.
Okay.
And so here's a very specific way that I learned to orient new members to our program. Is I would share with them up front, hey, you know what, as we're getting to know each other, I'll be giving you rides in my car more frequently. I'll probably be buying you food. We'll go, coffee houses and restaurants. And these are really good activities to get to know each other really well. But as your recovery progresses, I will start to do less of those things. Now, when that happens, I don't know yet, but I will communicate it with you. So, like, for example, a member like in that situation would come in and say, hey, can I get a ride? I have an appointment at the Social Security office. And I'd be all like, well, how long have you known about that appointment? For a month?
Yeah.
And you're coming in now and the appointment's in 30 minutes, I'm going to have to tell you no at this point. This is a natural consequence of you not planning, which you're perfectly capable of. You've been in here every day for the last week. You could have told me about this Monday. And so in that situation, I'm telling the member no, but I'm also letting them know why. And then another member comes in who's new to the program, says, can I get a ride to the Social Security Administration? Same day, same time. I'm like, yeah. And they're all like, well, why'd you give him a ride? Well, I'm not going to talk to you about their treatment, but I can talk to you about yours. Once again, I said no because you're capable of more. We could have planned this better. That's a natural consequence of you not planning. We're not here to be a taxi. Our rides are here to be a support, and it's beyond support now. Does that distinction make sense to people? Yeah. Thank you.
That's, I want to piggyback up if there's still time. And that's the problem that you guys have worked with other veterans before, and that's the problem that we pull into. All of veterans, most of us that come back, we lack the idea that we need help in the first place. And we wait 6 months, 7 months.
Yeah.
And then we go and ask you for help and you say no, and then we won't fall into the whole victim. Like, no one helps you. Like, bro, you knew about this 7 months ago. You
Yeah.
could have prevented going homeless 5 months ago. But now you want me to help you and make a miracle happen in the next 20 seconds? I can't.
Yeah.
But then that's the problem of us not accepting the and willingness to, like, I need the help when it's needed so I can come in and check it before it gets worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And so with member preference, this is one of the 5 factors. Hopefully we're considering, let's call it equally with the other factors. But one of these factors, more than any, as we go through this, will ultimately be the factor that we use to make a decision. It's not always member preference. It's not always ethics. It's not always personal. It's not always job, and it's not always team. In most situations, there's going to be one factor above all that we use to decide. And so that's member preference. And it's 9:58. So we're going to get ready to take a break, but here's a prompt for you all. Are there times that we go against a member's preference or request? And if the answer is yes, does anybody have a very concise example? And I'll give you one. I already did. Member comes in and asks for a ride. I think they're capable of more. I tell them no and why. Any other times that we would go against a member's request and be concise? Anybody have any experience with saying no to a member? Ruth. And then Carlos.
Yeah, something just popped in my head. So I've been working with people in prison to address childhood trauma for like the last 5 years. And I've gotten multiple marriage proposals.
So there you go.
Big no. Yeah.
That would be a big no. Yes, yes. Yeah, thank you for that. So that's a hard no. Okay, there's multiple people, so be very concise, just like Ruth was. Carlos, and then Matthew, then Yolanda.
I'll let Matthew go. It's fine.
You sure? Okay, Matthew.
When something arises like, hey, could you hire me for a job, or like on a personal level, like you just have to draw certain lines that can't be crossed.
There you go. There you go. Hey, can I wash your car? No.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Matthew. Yolanda.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to talk about this one in terms of the ethics and boundaries relative to the domain and the core competencies for the blueprint of the test. This one fits in that area very well. I think it's very important when you have a consumer or a participant, day one, to create a communal agreement of what are the boundaries. So from day one, what I do is sit with the consumer or the participant and say, it's mutual though.
Yeah.
What are our agreement? how are we going to work together? What are the times? What's the framework? And we just go over that all day. What do we want in this communal agreement of our ethics and our boundaries and how we're going to work together? So I come with my agreement, and then I let the participant and the consumer add what they want. And the hours of operation is extremely important.
Yeah,
That's
because
all
they
I wanted
differ.
to
They
add.
differ. Yeah, thank you for that, because they differ. So are
Yes,
there,
thank you.
thank you. Are there any other examples where any of you have had to say no to a member? Be specific and concise. Jonathan.
Yeah, I was gonna just say, just simply gifts. When people want to, give you gifts for the services you provide, it's at least a rule for our agency that we're not allowed to take any type of gifts. Though, I mean, some people do it, but it's something that we do have to say. We are supposed to say no to at least.
Yeah. So there's an example. I'd like to give you this. I'm sorry, I can't accept it. Yeah, thank you. Taylin.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So what we've run into a lot is requesting money for things like food or requesting money to like hit the bus or something. But obviously we decline because we're not allowed to give money. But at the same time, there's resources, and sometimes people don't want to just like do the resource, like you can go get aid for food, or you can get like a pass for a bus and from, so there's things like that too.
Absolutely. So yeah, you know what? I can't give you any money, but there's this whole list of places with food. I don't want to do that. Sorry, can't give you money, but I could give you. Yeah, great example. We're going to go for another prompt because we're going to take a break at 10:05 since we started at 9:05. Okay, so here's the second prompt. Are there times that we will say yes to a member that stretches our comfort zone? And I'm going to give you one example because I know there's people that don't like to hug. They don't like touch, people that work in the field. Okay, but I've seen moments where a member will come in and ask for a hug. The person's not naturally a hugger, the staff, and they will hug the member because they felt it was important too. So that would be an example of stretching my comfort level to the request or benefit of the member. Taylin. Oh, you're on mute.
My hand was accidentally up. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, now you have to give an example.
Well,
no,
I mean,
no, I'm kidding.
I relate to that example that you gave actually, because I am not a hugger whatsoever. But a lot of times, they will come into my office requesting one.
Yeah.
And I know when you know how much it means to the person, because for them it's that connection.
Yeah.
I let my guard down, and that's just like a personal thing that I have, and I really need to get over it too. It's not,
Yeah.
You're
like, oh, I could get more comfortable with this. They're helping you become more comfortable. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for that wonderful example. Julia.
I had an interaction with a member once where they volunteered for a role at our center that I think because of my own assumptions about their abilities or their capabilities, I wouldn't have thought that they were prepared for. And so it kind of took me out of my comfort zone to meet them where they were at and allow them to kind of show me like, no, I've totally got this. I can do this thing.
Yeah. Wow. What a wonderful example. It kind of helped you shift your assumptions a little bit, but you were open to experiencing that and acknowledging, wow, turned out very different than I thought. Yeah. Thank you for that. That takes a great amount of humility, Julia. Thank you. Yeah. Matthew, then Isabel.
This is a response and kind of a question to see what you think of it. It's not something I experienced. It's something my therapist told me she'd done one time. She was helping a client like do an interview, like a Zoom kind of interview. And she goes, I let her use my personal computer at the office, kind of shut the office up. And she goes, I hid under my desk. So I was there for her, even though I wasn't supposed to be. And she goes, the client like had to show the room to show that no one was there. And she
Yeah.
goes, she goes, I'm really not supposed to do that, but I did because I felt it was important for me to be there just as support. So I don't know if that would count or if that was right or wrong, but
it counts. You're not going to find something in the code of ethics that would say that that is the wrong thing to do. That's the fluid nature as we get to ethics that I will hope to be able to show everyone is ethics are a lot more fluid. There's only a few that are like hard nose. Yeah. I actually think that's a wonderful example of treating the person as an individual and trying to meet their needs and actually stretching our comfort zone. I think that's a wonderful example.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Matthew. Isabel, and then we're going to take a break.
I actually just remembered as everyone was talking a moment with my last mental health job. It was nonprofit in Stockton. And I was the youngest person who ever been there. So like other people had experiences with this before other than me. But a member had mentioned that her son had passed away and she really wanted some of us like workers to go to the service and be there for her. And so like maybe 3 or 4 of us had gotten into one car and we decided during our work hours that we would go and support her. It was for me, it's something because of my own personal history with grief that I wanted to do for her as well. But it was definitely something out of our comfort zone because for me, I was like, do we even do that? Like, do we provide services that far that we go to a service to provide services for that person? Because honestly, I think when we showed up, it made a world of a difference that we were there for her. I honestly think that it made a difference because she did start crying a little bit and like, her hug was longer than I had experienced before. Like when she told us versus when we were there, the hug that she gave me was very, very different. But it was very different to be going to the service for a member, but it was honestly one of the best things I think I've ever done for someone to support them.
Awesome example, Isabel. We're going to get ready to take a break here, 10-minute, but I want to end with this part with what Isabel shared is there again, I've been to many services. I think I've actually been to a member's wedding too, once or twice. Many different activities, and at specific agencies that would be perfectly legitimate to do. And so even though a staff might be uncomfortable with doing it, it's legitimate to do. And I want to reference how I'm calling it a small act of going to a service can just blow a member away that, wow, you would actually show up here. Even though I'm uncomfortable doing it, I think it'll benefit the member. And so it's just, and it goes back to even Matthew's example is the issue is sometimes we get too rigid in any of these directions. The emphasis is to try to be more fluid. So we're going to pause now to take our 10-minute break. And we're going to be back at 10:19. And sorry, so we're going to do a Mentimeter. What I want you to look at with this is there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 items. You can choose, you can scan the QR code or you can click on the link in the chat I put in there. And you're going to answer for each prompt, a friend of yours receives treatment at your agency. That's always ethical, it's always unethical, or somewhere in the middle. And when we reach critical mass, we'll briefly cover these things.
Guy, maybe I misunderstood the prompt.
Yeah.
Because like the first question says a friend of yours receives treatment at your agency,
Yeah.
always unethical or always ethical, and I don't understand the context of the ethics piece with the statement a friend of yours receives treatment at your agency.
Yeah, this is a preliminary slide before we actually get into defining ethics. It's just to kind of see where people are at. And so all people are doing is just reading the prompt as it's written and putting your best guess whether it's always unethical, always ethical, or somewhere in the middle. Because then we're going to be covering a lot of ethics, Arian. Yeah. So it's just to see where people land.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me get rid of the QR code now so we can see these. And we have 26 people logged in out of, let's see here, out of 43. So here in a minute or two, we'll start going through these.
I find, can I interject? I find the seventh one a little bit ambiguous. The second to last one.
Oh,
you know,
it's the way it's written. Yeah, I think.
Well, like we're always self-disclosing something, but I don't know what it pertains to, what the subject is. So hard one for me. It's like.
Yeah. So it's your best guess at any like self-disclosure in general, right?
Okay.
Like sharing some part of our story, our recovery.
Okay.
Is that always ethical to share? Is it always unethical or somewhere in between? I do need to reword that though. Yeah.
Not being present. Like she said, we can walk and chew gum.
If I can say something, just I when I read this, what I see is policy, just policies of the agency.
Okay.
Because I think it's important when we are working in an agency that it's sometimes it is made clear to us and sometimes it's not.
Absolutely.
But it depends how the agency is. So like sometimes if an agency is at capacity and we don't like they to send someone to another counselor, to another, to someone else to help them, and there's nothing available, then they'll need our help. But then, so I think it's kind of the agency policies. And I think that, to know when it's right to disclose this to the, when it's right to communicate this. So if an agency says, you can't give a client a ride in your own car, your personal vehicle, there might be another agency that there's a policy that that might be part of the job. It might be part of the
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I think that's all just around policy and definitely around setting boundaries, because if we know someone too well and they need help with something, then what part of us wants to see them get help and what part of us wants to be a friend to them? What part of us, how professional are we really? And, will that interfere or would that support? So it
absolutely
kind of comes to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And
ethics.
again, no,
But yeah.
absolutely. And I'm gonna break these down here like literally in a second. And remember, this is a preliminary slide to see where people naturally land, and then we're gonna spend a lot of time on what are ethics. So here it goes. A friend of yours receives treatment at your agency. Every code of ethics for anyone that's credentialed, social worker, MFT, psychologist, therapists, peer supporter. This is actually in the code of ethics. And so here's what this one is. It's called dual relationships, where a provider, a person, has two relationships with the client. So here's how we're supposed to handle that. Is a person comes in that I know, and this has actually happened to me. A friend of mine came into the agency that I was working. The first thing I did, besides saying hello, was I let my supervisor know, hey, I need to let you know, so-and-so is coming in here for services. We actually have a long-standing friendship. And so what the supervisor did, the way they handled it was, okay, that's cool. So we will have your friend work with someone else in the agency. And then what I did was I sat down with my friend and said, hey, look I can't be part of any of your treatment, period. We can still be friends, but I can't be part of any of your treatment. So when we're hanging out, we don't talk about your treatment. And when you're in your treatment, we don't talk about our friendship. We had to have a clear line. Now, the key in this is the important thing, is if we don't disclose it, that's where we end up in hot water. We have to disclose it with our supervisors. And I'm going to show you the nuance of a lot of these ethics as we get into the ethic part. Matthew.
My SUD counselor was actually, I had asked him about this a couple of weeks ago before getting into the program, and he said exactly what you said, but he went one step further. And I don't know if this is how everybody works or just maybe their place, but he said not only are you supposed to disclose it and like let everybody know, but he goes, our supervisor will actually lock that person's account or their profile from you completely, so you have no access to it.
Yeah. For me, when it happened, it was pre-electronic error. So absolutely, that's an additional smart step. So there's no bleeding into it. Yeah. Thank you, Matthew. So what I really appreciate, Matthew, that you're bringing up is these real world examples that are like actually come back to show like the relevancy of what we're talking about. Yeah. So the second one is going on a date with a client. Okay, so this is one of the no's. Now, some code of ethics, the way they write it is they'll write it something like you can't date a client unless they've been discharged for services for like 18 months. Now, this is what I tell my staff. You don't ever do it. And the reason why I tell my staff you don't ever do it is because I don't want a staff and a member to get together and come up with a really cool plan of discharge from services and we'll secretly buy our time. So I just tell staff it's a no-go. But that's also in the ethics. That's one of those cardinal rules we don't violate. Driving a client in your car, that's going to be dependent upon agency. I've worked at one agency where it was required. I've worked at another agency where it was forbidden. So at the agency, it was forbidden. When a member would ask, we would let them know we're not allowed to drive you in your car, but we can set up an Uber or Lyft or a cab. Going to a sporting event or concert. Now this again would be agency dependent, and we're going to break that down. In some agencies I've worked, it was required to do things outside of what we would call regular business hours. But make no mistake about it, when we were out at that concert, like I took a member to a punk rock show on a Friday night with my friends, it was actually every supervisors knew, staff knew, it was actually a formal intervention. I just happened to be going to a punk show. It was a win-win. And we were in the pit together and I knocked them down. I did pick them up because that's the rule in the pit. But okay, assisting a client with purchasing a drug cleansing kit. Again, now that would be agency dependent. And I'm going to keep reminding you that when we get to the ethics in the next couple slides, I'm going to show you why this is important. Giving a client a hug, agency dependent. Self-disclosure, sharing some version of our story, our life, to connect, that actually In most ethics, it's written something like this. We self-disclose when we think it will benefit the member, the client. Now, welcome to getting that wrong sometimes. That's okay. Sometimes we overshare. It happens. But it's ethical to share, like, yes, I was homeless before too, or yes, I've struggled with medication before too, or whatever it is. It's perfectly ethical to do it when we think it will benefit the other person. Where it goes too far is how we learn sometimes. And then meeting a client alone in their apartment, that would be agency dependent too. So some agencies, you don't ever do it. Some agencies, you're required to do it. So now let's get into.
Can I ask a quick question that's kind of important that I find?
Yes.
So what if we have shared an apartment or we with somebody that ends up at the treatment center where one of us is working, and they might not, you might have not moved in as a friend, but there's somebody that you share the bills with, you eat together. How is that boundary set in a recovery setting? If how is that boundary set within agencies? If that happens.
Yeah. So the key distinction is I'm gonna move away from the term boundary, because it's an ethical.
Ethics.
Yeah.
Ethics.
And so the key, this is the simple version, is we disclose that to the supervisor. That's our ethical obligation. And then the supervisor will help guide us and the member, the client, in how we interact with that situation. That's the key thing, is because I'm in LA County. It's easy to hide. But code of ethics, as we get forward, I'm going to show you this. Code of ethics are written to accommodate for a town of 500 or 1,000 and LA County, which is millions. And so the key thing to keep in mind, I can't tell you what your agency will do. That's why the ethics are written as they are, is you let your supervisor know, and then they will guide the situation. And that's your preventative measure, is you inform your supervisor. We have a duty and obligation to inform. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I was wondering if that those ethics would be held to that situation, situation, the same way.
Absolutely.
If we told our supervisor if it was a friend, but they okay.
Yeah, absolutely. The key thing is here's where I've seen people get in trouble. And this is why I'm simplifying the response to say, we let the supervisor know and they will help guide us. By doing that, by letting them know, we're protecting ourselves and the client. Now, if we don't say anything and we keep it a secret, what I've seen people do is lose their job because they didn't. So I can't tell you how your supervisor or someone is going to actually, what they're going to require of you. But like we were talking about, and Matthew brought it up too, which is we let the supervisor know and they will guide us in how to not get fired. Yeah. Thank
That'd
you
be
for
unethical.
that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. All right. So what are ethics? Well, this is really interesting, and this is where I'm going to elaborate quite a bit. The Code of Ethics is a set of guidelines and principles used by professional organizations such as Cal Mesa Peer Specialists. I'm going to show you your Code of Ethics. But they're also designed by agency. And what the agency said is policy. So your Code of Ethics come from a credentialing body. Everyone that has a credential has a Code of Ethics written, and they're written from a principle and guideline standpoint. So for example, therapists, social workers that do private practice can barter for services. It's written in the Code of Ethics. What is bartering? Well, I provide therapy. and you provide a service to the company, like maybe you're a janitorial company. So you clean our offices and you get free therapy. That's bartering. They can do that. It's not common because, especially again in LA, LA is very different than a small rural town in Central California where I provide services and my kids go to school with your kids and we go to the same church and there's only one provider. The code of ethics are written to accommodate every type of community. Does that make sense so far to people? There's only a few absolutes. There's only a few. And that's why, again, the answer is it depends. So companies create policies which become de facto ethics and credentialing bodies. Go ahead, Angelina. Oh, you're on mute.
So something interesting that happened to me, I mentioned yesterday that I brought some girls into my life, part of my story yesterday. And what was really interesting was that California law required for the agency, social services, to have let me know about the history of the girls, but social services had their own policies. And I was just blown away by that, by the disparity there. And so it just blew me away that California law said one thing, social services had their own policy. And it was crazy to me that could be the case.
Yeah,
And
there's sometimes there's conflicts or, you know, differences. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Angelina. Yolanda.
Hi, Guyman. Good
Hi.
morning. Angelina, I just wanted to say that I, like you, I have this affinity, you know, to really, really help our girls. And Guyman, you know my story because I graduated from Project Return 2020. But when my daughter was 9, she said she wanted to commit suicide. So now she's 21, Guyman, and she's graduating from UCLA with her degree in political science. And she's also graduating, Guyman, with another degree in higher education.
Yeah.
She was valedictorian. We miss Jason Garcia. We love Jason. But she was valedictorian of her high school, 4.5 grade point average. And she was also, she did 54 units of her 1 and 200 level classes in high school. She's a rock star. I'm president of her nonprofit. She's the CEO. I am confident. Her nonprofit is on UCLA campus. She got into Harvard for her master's
Yolanda,
in education.
I do
no,
want
but
to,
I'm saying
I do
this,
want to jump
Guyman,
in. I want to make sure that it connects to this.
No, I got you. Ethics. Okay, ethics.
Yeah, yeah.
So as I'm working with a contract with Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health, right? I have several young ladies that I'm helping, back to Angelina and ethics. Several young ladies that I'm helping, only having one daughter. I said, oh my God, I wish I hear their stories, horrific. I said, I wish I would have had you as a baby because I only had one and I wanted 2, 3, 4. Ethics. LA County Department of Mental Health would not allow, if the child or the girl was being molested, they would not allow you to take in that girl, even if she was being molested by someone in her family, unless she was emancipated by the court. So we just had to go through this. So the ethics is she still has to stay in that home until a caseworker decides that she's removed, and ethically you cannot remove her or you're in trouble. Yeah. But at 13, if she's being molested, Angelina, she can emancipate herself. So she can emancipate herself to be in charge of herself. So the ethics in terms of the state laws, Guyman, there's guidelines and principles in those professional organizations, even if they're being harmed. So it gets real tricky.
Yeah.
It gets real interesting.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I'm actually
share who I am.
Thank you.
And Project Return was a big help. to
Thank
me.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. We love
So,
you, Project
thank you. So the code of ethics are guidelines and principles that are written to accommodate for rural America and urban settings. They accommodate for all. They're written in a way that says when we're presented with A, we consider these things. And then organizations will create policies, and that becomes the hybrid. So ethics in this scenario is a combination of agency policy and credentialing guidelines. The key facet is we do no harm. I'm going to keep moving forward, okay, Annika, unless you have a very specific question related to this, because we got a lot to cover with ethics.
I do, and that is if there is a policy with an agency, and let's say that policy is that each person is trained, and a new staff coming in is trained by staff that has already finished their training. If you are, let's say, if a new staff is supposed to be observing you, but let's say they've already been at the agency before you, and they're told to follow what I'm doing, but let's say they start doing what they knew before then, and I'm asked to let them continue doing what they're doing, would you be responsible as holding good ethics in that agency?
I don't know. That would be, it depends. If I'm supposed to train staff, it's my supervisor's job to supervise and things like that. So I would not see that as an ethical thing. That would be in terms of that would be maybe job role responsibility. So I really couldn't answer it, because some agencies are more fluid than others. Some agencies are more rigid. It really depends. Yeah. So let's go through this more. So the key feature of ethics, they're written as guidelines and principles. Agencies set policy. The key protective feature is we're not supposed to do harm, but we will make mistakes. There's a distinction. The absolutes are it forbids exploitation of the member. We don't have sex. We don't abuse the people we serve, and we don't exchange personal money, meaning loan money or borrow money from a client. These are things in terms of direct service practices that it doesn't matter where we work, we'd end up in trouble. Does that make sense? Okay. So now there are nuance to the money thing. I have given money, like it's in a pinch. Someone says, oh, I need bus money. And it's like, oh man, we don't have any tokens. Okay, here's $5, but don't give it back to me. And then what I would do is I would write out a receipt. I'd get reimbursed from the agency. And then that becomes, it was the agency money. But we don't loan or borrow money. The key feature is we don't do things that's going to super negatively impact their treatment and abuse the power dynamic that exists. Does that make sense to people so far? All right. So here's a distinction: law versus ethics. There's a difference. Law allegedly is the norms established by society through the political process. That's laws. We have drug laws. We have all these different laws. Ethics is a focus on social justice, doing what we think is right. And ethics may be in conflict with unjust laws. So to operate ethically, it may go against a law. They're not the same. Law and ethics are not the same. Laws are one thing, ethics are another. So real succinct, we don't have a lot of time. Is there any example, and I'm talking concise, any example of a law that anyone can think of that you would find unethical to adhere to? And I'm going to give one. Jim Crow. would be an example. Though it was a law, the way I am, I would have said, I don't give a shit about that law. I'm not following it. Because we're not law enforcement. Is there any other concise example that anyone can think of? Matthew?
I know most of the time when you're like a counselor in that kind of role, you're a mandated reporter, and you're technically supposed to report anything homicidal, suicidal, child abuse. But I've heard a lot of people go, you know, they say they're suicidal, but I dig a little deeper into it and don't feel that they actually are, so I don't report it.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And that would be a really good example, even though not all states are the same. In California, if you work in the field in any of these environments, we're mandated reporters. We're supposed to report any child, a suspected abuse or neglect, adult suspected abuse or neglect, suicidal ideation, homicidal ideation, things like that. But it doesn't mean we report everything that we initially hear or see. We also have an ethical obligation to have a pretty decent idea that whatever we're going to report is or will occur. Which is why I always encourage people, don't ever report anything in isolation. Consult with your colleagues, because sometimes our bias gets in the way. And there are therapists that, look, if every therapist reported everyone that ever came in and said they had suicidal ideation, A, probably nobody would ever say it. B, it's like sometimes there's additional layers. You're right about that. There's additional layers to that. It's like, that's why we ask questions. Yeah. Thank you for that, Matthew. Carlos.
Yes, yesterday we covered the whole thing about trust and building relationships. Goes back to the same thing with ethics. I had to go, I was doing therapy, and I made a statement of the way I portray things or see things. And the therapist decided to go ahead and open up a case on me.
Yeah.
A case of a child, I can't remember the name of it. And afterwards, I came back and so you tell me that I can't even speak freely about thoughts,
right?
Because you can automatically open up cases for me. Do you understand that my wife is a mandated reporter?
Yeah.
So that was an actual case. Now you should literally not only jeopardizing my life, jeopardizing her work. Like what is this about? Like I'm supposed to be here in a place of trust. And afterwards, she's like, you know what? I think I did overstep the line, and I'm sorry. I understand where you're coming from because of your job, but I'm not longer in the state of mind that I was in 20 years ago. You asked for background. I provided you background, but we were able to work it through and still. But the same token, like this could, like, if it would have gone farther and case been clearly carried out, this would have jeopardized my whole life in general. And that, the way I turned out afterwards, it wasn't too pleasant, like the way I reacted, which is the simple fact of you're right. Everything needs to get investigated prior to ensure that you're not inflicting more suffering or pain on unnecessary risk on people that don't need.
Yeah, we got to be thoughtful about these things for sure. You know, not too quick and not too slow to act. Annika.
I have a question, because if somebody asked me where I got the information from, let's say I'm a peer and I said, well, I took this training and it was required for employment. What if, you know, a client has a family member and they're visiting, and let's say they're 15 and they want some cigarettes, and you're the one, and a staff member, long-term staff member asks you on your errands, you're picking up medication, you're picking up, you know, different things, asked you to stop at the cigarette stores. And because it's, you know, to be because that's what's gonna support the client, you know, while they're in treatment. That's kind of, you know, that's something that is illegal, and that's something that is unethical. So how do you approach that situation if a staff that has more, you know, I'm not going to, more time there than you, more experience, and they're asking you to do something as a peer? You know, I'm going to pick up some clients, I'm going to pick up some medications, I'm coming back to the facility, and here's somebody that has been appointed to give me instruction has asked me to stop and make these cigarette runs for the clients and for a minor, and nothing is done. And I say to them, well, I've completed this training, and I reviewed the ethics. I learned about ethics, what's ethical and what's unethical. And this is what's happened, and nothing is done. What is your suggestion?
So I want to make sure there was a lot in there. So I want to make sure the core of the question is, an underage person is asking for cigarettes. Do I give them cigarettes or not?
Well, that's no. I mean, if a staff, if the staff says the director asked, told me is out today and asked me to give you instruction, and I need you to go and pick up cigarettes for these clients, and that's not, allowed, and you say that I took a training and I believe I truly, doing the right thing for the clients and for my job, I believe that that's unethical, and they they kind of go against you. They say something that, is
Annika, can I jump in? Because I want to make sure that I get the question.
What would you do if you were given instruction by someone to do something that is unethical, and your response to them was that you completed, this training, and you find it unethical? What would you do?
I don't know what the question about in general, what would I do?
Yeah, if you completed the training and you reference, this is the training I took, and this is what I learned about ethics, and I don't agree with what you're saying to a person that has given you instruction.
I don't know what they're saying. What you have.
Well, what would be ethical if you were in that position? What would be the ethical thing for you to do if you were given instruction to do something you believe is unethical and illegal? What action would you take?
So it depends. It depends. This is what I'm trying to get at is an underage person, either someone else or the underage person, asking me to give them cigarettes? Get to the core of that dilemma.
Well, the core is somebody that has more, that's has more say than you do. They've been there longer, is giving you instruction that you find unethical, and they're not respecting the training that you've received for this job. That's told you that that's unethical. What would you do?
Okay, so I'll answer it in a general way, because that's where details matter. It's not just about ethics. Remember, something might be ethical to do, but I might be uncomfortable doing it. So if I'm looking at things from a big perspective, right? And that's why I was asking, what is at the core of the ethical dilemma? If it's just a general thing, what do I do? How do I handle it? Well, it's simple for me. If I'm uncomfortable doing something, forget about ethics for a moment. If I'm uncomfortable doing something, I will state that I'm uncomfortable doing something and why. If it truly is an ethical thing, then I will let the supervisor know. And then again, the supervisor will guide how we handle it. Because just because I'm uncomfortable doesn't mean it's unethical. And just because it's unethical at one agency doesn't mean it's unethical at all agencies. And that's the distinction we're drawing. What might be permissive at my agency and or required might be forbidden at another agency. And so that's the distinction. So that's how I would answer it, is if I'm uncomfortable, I'm going to state it, but just because I'm uncomfortable doesn't mean it's unethical. That's the answer. So we're gonna take. Oh wait, Annika, were you saying something? Because I want to make sure that
Yeah. If you follow the ethics and you follow agency policy, so in this situation, it was not allowed to go, drive around and pick up cigarettes, and somebody that was just a stand-in for the supervisor was out. I said to go and do that. And I knew that the clients were triggered. I knew that they wanted to leave. There's more situation. So I said that I'm not comfortable. I believe that that's
There you
not client centered, and I feel like this isn't an ethical situation to, you know, to go against what the director had told me not to do, and what I know that the clients are triggered. So I know that that's not being helpful to them to,
Sure.
you know, and it's not helpful to discuss that with a peer, you know. So, you know, I feel like the training kind of should back us up and as a way of like supporting us in a way that the supervisor should refer to, because, you know, some people have different trainings and different experience, but when I
I'm
see
going to
that,
jump in,
Mhm.
Annika. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I'm going to jump in because I want to answer that and move forward. Is this training is designed, this specific one, and we're going to go through the peer specialist code of ethics so I can show you how they're written, is designed to give you a framework on how to make decisions in dicey situations. Some of the decisions we make are going to be agency dependent. And so what's permissive at one agency is going to be forbidden at another. That's how all the agencies operate. So we can't tell you, and it would be wrong to tell people in here, other than the few absolutes, this is how you always do it. This is what you always decide, because if you work at my agency, we might require you to do something at another agency that's forbidden, like the rides in cars. That's where I say that people that teach codes of ethics get it wrong, is they tell you this is all wrong. And then you get a job at an agency and they're all like, shit, that ain't wrong, that's required. So that's what this is meant to do. So let's go through the code of ethics here a little bit briefly. All right, so I want you to notice, here's the key feature. I want you to notice how they're written. So we inform others about options, provide information about choices, and then respect peers' decisions. These are all written mostly through the framework of how we interact with the people we serve. We assist those they support to access additional resource. Here's disclosing. We disclose lived experience of recovery in a way that maintains the focus on and is beneficial to the person we're helping. See how I had said how they're written in a very similar way? We self-disclose when we think it will benefit the other person. Shall not force, here's a shall, not force any values or beliefs onto the person engaging in services. You're going to notice that most of these are not written that strong. Remember, they're guidelines and principles. What do we do? So under family driven and child centered, which is C, we promote the family members' ethical decision making, the family members, and personal responsibility consistent with that family member's culture, values, and beliefs. So we promote their decision making. You could see respect, promote, support, disclose, build, and communicate. Holistic wellness. Honor the right of person engaging in services to choose alternative treatments and practices, including culturally specific traditional methods, etc. Notice how in here, again, keep an eye on the keywords: honor, recognize, practice, promote. It doesn't, there's very few that are written do not do or shall. Very few are written that way. All right. Authenticity, practice, honest and direct communication, share lived experience, work within their scope of practice, remain aware of their skills and limitations, seek supervision. This is where I keep referring back to, you're going to hear this later. When in doubt, I'm not sure how to act, check it out. Run it by a colleague, run it by a supervisor. Cultural responsiveness. We strive to provide culturally responsive services. We respect cultural identities. Here's a shall. Shall not discriminate against others on the basis of gender, race, ethnicity. So there's a shall. Shall not discriminate against others on a basis of any other preference protected by federal, state, or local law. Respect. Provide a welcoming environment. Approach each person will make an honest effort to empathize, view, accept, demonstrate. So I'm going to just roll through these because these are the key words to show you that they're written from a guidelines and principle standpoints with some shalls. Do not lend, give, or receive money or payment from any for any services to or from persons they support. Shall not be under the influence. Shall not secure a certification by fraud, deceit, or misrepresentation. Okay, advocacy. Support and defend human rights and freedoms. Advocate for inclusion. Advocate for full involvement. Strive to eliminate stigma and discrimination. Confidentiality. Safety and protection. Shall not provide services to individuals with whom they have had a prior romantic or sexual relationship. Inform appropriate persons when disclosure is necessary to prevent serious or imminent harms to persons served. Never intimidate, threaten, so there's a never. Recognize the unique nature of the peer relationship. So you could see how these are written. Most of them are written from we encourage. I'm going to pause real quick because what I want to reference, just like I said at the earlier slides, is you could see by the code of ethics, they're written in a way that says when we're acting, we're considering these things. And then you double down with agency policy. And here's what normally happens. The code of ethics are more permissive in general, right? They're more encouragement, guidelines, and principles. And then the agency, the closer you get to home, is usually where things get more restrictive. But keep in mind, if an agency pays us to act in certain ways, that most of the time will supersede anything from outside of the agency. Does that make sense to people? So I might feel like the agency's asking me to operate unethically. Like, for example, my agency requires me to be alone with clients as a general practice. I might have feelings about that, but that's the agency practice. That's the way we practice. That's the rules. That's the policy. There's nothing unethical about being alone with a client per se at this agency. Now, at another agency, it might be considered forbidden. Does that distinction make sense to people?
Yes, but what if somebody is doing something like intimidating someone and you notice that the director or a supervisor doesn't completely follow this framework?
You went back on mute, but I'm going to answer it simply is, once again, you report it to your supervisor, and at that point, it's mostly out of your hands. You could always kick it up a notch and go above the supervisor's head. But remember, for a lot of these questions, they're wonderful. It's going to be hard to get a definitive answer because agencies operate so vastly different. So your safe bet in many situations is let your supervisor know. And if they don't do anything, and you might not know if they're doing anything. I've supervised people for years, and a staff is like, yeah, you didn't do anything. It's like, well, you don't know that because I'm not coming back to tell you everything I did. I actually did something, but I'm not supposed to tell you what I did. All I can tell you is I got it handled. Thank you. And I'm doing stuff behind the scenes. So we don't always know. So the key is to let our supervisor know. That's the key feature in that. That's our obligation in general. Does that make sense? Talon.
Would you say generally, rule of thumb is like always inform supervisor?
Well, it depends. Again, because look, I've been doing this for 30 years and I've worked around so many people, and there'd be people that get hired and they're newer and they're unfamiliar with our model, and everything we do is problematic to them. Now, those people, in my experience, tended not to last long at that agency in particular, because they're like, they had issues with everything we did. And it's like, but everything we did was required. And it was just what it was. So, but I think it's a safe bet to communicate with our supervisor. And the safe bet again is, I think, to eliminate operating in secret, or maybe to run something by a supervisor so we could get clarity. But if we're only doing it like because we're uncomfortable with a bunch of stuff, and we don't accept the answers from the organization, well, maybe that's not the place for me. And we're going to get into that later too, which is, that's an important decision to make. So it's oftentimes to seek clarity and understanding too. Does
With
that
your
help answer?
experience, how would you receive support? How would you look for support if the director doesn't follow the framework and doesn't respond with an answer?
I don't.
How would you receive support for that situations? Like, you want to be there, and you want to be in contributing, and you are, and something comes up where they just aren't following this framework, and you feel that you'd like to be supported.
Following which framework?
Just the code of ethics. Who would you look to for support in that situation?
I've never been in that situation, so I wouldn't know how to answer that. Because again, the distinction for everyone in here is agencies aren't going to be looking at these code of ethics and going, oh, as an organization, we got to operate this way. That's not what agencies do. Agencies come up with missions and values and the service delivery system, and that's what they're going to adhere to. And almost never do what agencies do directly conflict with the code of ethics. It's just because, again, look at how they're written. And that's, we're going to move forward too, Carlos, because I know we got to take a break here. So this is what I mean by that is we communicate and behave in ways that promote wellness, recovery, and resiliency. That's written in such a vague way that agencies will have a clear definition of what they expect of staff to do that would follow that. Focus on what is strong, not as wrong. A lot of agencies and staff actually focus what is wrong with people. And it doesn't mean that you're going to lose your credentials. So agencies don't sit back and look at code of ethics like these, or social worker or therapy or psychologist. They don't look at these and design services. They design services. It's up to us to either work within that model at the job, because they almost never conflict with the code of ethics. In fact, I can't think of a time that they do. So here's your may nots. Falsify documentation, retaliate, engage in conduct, participate or promote discrimination. These are our may nots, and most agencies would not allow that anyways. So this is the first part of ethics, but it's 11:09 and it's 11:10. So we're going to take our 10-minute break and we're going to come back.
Guyman.
Yeah.
Do you have a minute? Can we go into a side room?
I don't right now.
Okay.
But I may later.
All right. Let's do it later.
Yeah.
After class.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
So you all had a homework assignment, which was this sheet, which was ethics or personal boundaries. So I'm just have it up on the screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a few of these. And the homework assignment was to first, these two boxes was there should be a policy and or there shouldn't be a policy. Here's the thing to think about policies. Not all policies are restrictive. Some policies are actually permissive. And what do I mean by that? I'm going back to the basic examples of at one agency, it was required to drive people in our cars. That's a permissive policy. It's required. Now remember, that has nothing to do with credential code of ethics. Zero. It's agency practice. And at another agency, the policy was we don't drive people in our cars. So it wouldn't matter how we feel in general, in either situation, we comply with the agency or we don't, and we live with those decisions. So, and then the other is it's okay never. It's okay some of the time, okay most of the time, okay always. So I'm going to pick a couple. A member is interested in finding a church and asks you if you can attend, if they can attend services where you go. Is it okay to say yes? So I'm going to actually call on people because I want to get more voices in here. And the first question I have as I call your name is, do you think there should be a policy that either says you can take them to church or you can't? And I'm going to call on Hillary. Or is it Mars? What do you prefer, Hillary?
It's Hillary.
Okay.
I would say that there does not need to be a policy for that.
Okay.
And I would say if that's something you feel comfortable doing, then that should be allowed.
Okay, so it would be your feeling is we don't need a policy, and if it's something you're comfortable taking them to your church, by all means do it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you. Let's see, I'm just going around. I want to see if Stephanie, who's right next to you on the screen, topping that is, do you feel different? Do you think there should be a policy? Is it okay? And I don't see your dog there, Stephanie. Uh-oh. Stephanie, did you leave the room because I called on you?
No, I pressed
oh, there you go.
Instead
there
of
you go.
mute. No, now I talked and now my dog's gonna come over here. I said okay some of the time just because I don't think it should be now he's back. A policy. It should be just if you're comfortable with it and it's not outlined that you can't do it, then it should be fine.
Okay, there you go. And so thank you for that, Stephanie and Hillary. So here's, again, the thing about this. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm not here to tell you how to act. It's a framework for making decisions. And so within, say, the code of ethics, I keep referencing LA County. Anybody else live in a big county like LA? Yeah. So there's a million churches. Would I take someone to my church? I wouldn't. Is it forbidden? No, because let's say anybody here live in a small town, a more rural. Yeah, Julia. So Julia, if you don't mind unmuting, please. When you look at a lot of these things, what do you notice that's different about your community and the application of these things versus, say, like in LA County, probably?
Yeah, so in my community, especially if someone is looking for like a different faith practice or a certain denomination, there aren't a lot of options. So if that person wants to go to church, there may only be a handful of churches to go to. There may only be one church in their denomination. If I go to that church, I wouldn't feel comfortable saying, no, you can't attend the only place that caters to your needs.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you. And the reason, thank you, Julia, for speaking up about like a rural America. And the reason is I've done this training at a conference one time. And again, I took certain things for granted in LA County because there's a million churches, there's a million self-help there's a million agencies here. There's a million of everything. And as I was saying certain things, someone from a small town was like, well, that's all good. But we're the only behavioral health agency here. And so our clients are also our church members, our PTA members, my kids' friends. And it reminded me of how beautiful the code of ethics are written in that it's like it accommodates for that. So thank you. All right, let's do another one. A member brings a plant for your desk as a thank you gift for the help you provided them. Do you accept it? I'm going to call on Tamika, please. Should there be a policy about gift giving? And either way, what's your stance on okay, never, all the way to okay, always? Oh, you're on mute, Tamika.
Yeah. Okay, so do I think there should be a policy on gift giving? I think that there should be, because as far as how big a gift, how little of a gift, it just shouldn't be any giving at all, I believe. So there should be some type of policy on that. And what is it, okay or never? It's okay, never okay to accept a gift. I don't think so.
Okay, thank you for that, Tamika. Let's see. I'm going to call on Joshua, who's right next to you on the screen. What are your thoughts, Joshua?
I would say there should be a policy on it, especially too, like just depending on someone's intentions on giving you a gift or the reasons why. I would say, the ifs, what's, or buts about it. So I would say yes, there should be a policy, especially to protecting the person who's receiving it or giving the gift.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So those of you that work in the field, you have a job somewhere in social services right now. Do you know what your agency policy is about gift giving? Jonathan, you've got you're nodding your head.
Yeah, it's kind of a gray area. Like, we're technically not supposed to take gifts. We've had training that's, to basically kind of, thank people for, the offer, but tell them the best gift that they can give is maybe a review through the website, or maybe, leaving a message for our supervisor that, we're doing, a good job in that sense. But it's a gray area too, because we also teach cultural competency, and we have a lot of different cultures that come to my agency, and sometimes within that culture, especially with a plan, it is customary to bring that in. So it's okay to say, to accept that on that basis, but then kind of lead in like, I appreciate what you're doing, thank you for you making me a part of your culture. I really appreciate that we're on that eye to eye level, but if we can, for future reference, please refrain from that, and then kind of lead in the best gift that they can give is like a good comment via the website, or contacting by phone. Yeah,
very cool. Thank you, Jonathan. So your agency has a policy, and you also consider cultural sensitivity, and you have different ways to actually address it where it doesn't shut somebody down or make them feel bad, but it provides some kind of like context and nuance. Did I capture that?
Yeah,
thank
absolutely.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew.
I said I'm not technically in the field, but like I've been mentioning earlier, I talk a lot to my counselor about. I've asked about these exact same kind of questions, and he said at their place they have a very strict policy in hand. It's you can accept a gift as long as it's like under $20 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then it also depends on who it's from. If it's a female client who's giving you something, that could be construed as, I want something back from you or something like that, it's absolutely not okay. But because I asked him, I go, well, I give you beef jerky because that's what I sell. I go, I give you beef jerky every once in a while. He goes, no, that's fine. He goes, you're giving it to me. You're not asking me for anything. It's well under the $20 limit. He goes, that's fine. And he goes, it's up to your discretion as well if you ever want to accept something. But I do think there should be a policy at least.
Yeah. Very cool. Thank you. And so let's see, I see Stephanie. So go ahead, jump in really quick, Stephanie, and then I'm going to summarize this one.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm really small too. We're up by Yosemite. We're very rural. We have a policy also, I think like under $20. I think I'm pretty new there, but a lot of I'm on the children's team. So obviously the kids draw us
Yeah.
pictures and things, and we're not about to turn down like a 4-year-old who drew something for us
Yeah.
and put it on our desk.
Yeah.
And I mean that would count as a gift, but it's not like technically like someone buying us something. So I think
Yeah.
that's probably like an exception.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that, Stephanie. So in general, my experiences and Project Return is included in that. We have a policy around gifts. We are not allowed to accept gifts beyond $25. Now, here's the cool thing about this. I want to really stress this. There are some agencies that will say we don't accept gifts, period. So that would become the ethical consideration in this example at that agency. I really appreciate the offer. We're not allowed to accept gifts, but and handle it. Now at Project Return, we can accept gifts. It's actually written in our handbook, up to like $20, $25. Now that does not mean that we accept every gift, much like Matthew was saying and Jonathan. There are times when we would turn down a gift, and that's okay. And we just communicate that in a respectful way, even though we're allowed to. I really appreciate the gift, but I don't feel comfortable accepting the gift. And so I'm acknowledging my discomfort in that. Now, one thing I have learned to do is to accept gifts on behalf of the organization over the years. Thank you. That piece of artwork is wonderful. I would love to hang it up on the wall here, and it'll stay forever in honor of the organization. Something like that. So we're going to go on to another one. Let's see. A member expresses interest in earning more money. Do you offer to pay them to wash your car once a week? Let me call on Mary. Oh, no, wait, Desiree. Desiree, I see your head shaking. Should there be a policy about letting someone wash your car?
We have a policy here because there's a very nice homeless man that we all know around here, and he tries to say, hey, can I wash your car for like $20? And it's a no. We can't do that.
Yeah. Okay. And what's your understanding of the purpose of the no?
For my director and my management, it's more of like this individual. There's where I work at Healing Oaks Clinic in San Diego, and there's a bus stop right in front of our clinic that unfortunately has a lot of people just smoking a crack pipe right there in front of people walking by, sitting at the bus stop. And he is unfortunately one of those people. So as much as they want to help, they don't want to give out money to him like that for those reasons.
Fair. So most, wait, I see Taylin, and then I'll summarize this one.
So this is just from personal experience too, right? So impact centers in Pasadena, California, they do that. So when you get to a certain level of care, they will initiate for people to do that. Like, hey, if you need some extra money, you can wash one of the staff members' vehicles, and we'll give you a little bit of pocket change. So when you go on your pass, you guys have money to do stuff,
Yeah.
So, and I think that was really cool because it does change their mindset and get them into, okay, you know what? This is kind of cool. I'm making money. Let me go out and find a real job,
Yeah. Thank you,
It's Talene.
Talene. I'm so sorry. So here's the key feature in that I think, and again, it speaks to the nuance of stuff, the context and the details matter. The impact program has a specific program that the organization runs that allows clients to wash cars. Staff can choose to opt in or out, but the liability or potential liability is actually on the organization. They're kind of absorbing the risk of it. So it's not a direct relationship between me, my car, and the client. It's a direct relationship between me, the agency. They're paying the clients to do this. Does that distinction make sense to people? So that's different. Now, if I hired a member directly to wash my car at most agencies, that would be frowned upon. Because remember, now I'm entering into a personal, financial, and business arrangement. So remember earlier when I said that's why a lot of answers are it depends, because we have to get into certain details to understand what's at play here. Because at one agency, we did the same thing, Talene. We actually had a car wash system. And so we absorbed the risk if anything went wrong. So that's why. And the reason why we don't generally, or organizations generally don't let us like pay a client to clean our house directly and stuff like that, or gardening work or stuff like that, is because what if something goes wrong? What if I don't pay them? What if they don't do a good job? What if there's all these variables that can play in? Now, having said that, again, what if you're in a small rural town like where Julia is, and one of the clients actually has a gardening business? Well, the agency might contract with that gardening business, and that would be okay in that situation because they're dealing directly as business entities. Annika.
I think that it's important that it's client centered, and what you're saying is important. It's kind of like paperwork. You know, if you're going to place paperwork in our car and the client wanted to wash our car, and let's say we saw them outside and then they wanted to wash our car, then that's kind of no. If something happened to someone, a client, while they were washing a car that caused some head trauma, and let's say they didn't speak English, and maybe, they had other, some other things going on that where they wanted to wash cars, but they wanted to become comfortable, I would, create it. I may not be able to incorporate it as a peer, but I would ask my supervisor if they would be able to incorporate it in the treatment plan, for example, because that's like a kind of indirectly helping them with something to help them just improve their life and improve their their mental health, and improve their their language, and to kind of reduce any barriers that are to support them.
Oh, you went back on mute, but I'm going to summarize. This is where organizations, again, will make that kind of decision. I've seen it be like the Impact House and other organizations where we created a structure, but I've also seen it where it was forbidden. So again, this is distinguishing between the Medi-Cal Peer Specialist Code of Ethics. Organizations make decisions that we hedge our bets on. We create our philosophy, our approach, our system, and that's what we get hired to do, is to follow the organization. They don't conflict with individual codes of ethics. I want to keep referring back to that. So here's one last one for this purpose. A member asks for a ride home. Assume there are no auto liability issues. Do you give them a ride? Let me call on Janet. Should there be a policy about giving clients a ride in your car, and then any variation of okay, never okay?
So specifically for my facility, we never let them ride in our car. We have like on-site vans that we have with them, because with our code of ethics, it's basically we will never do it, because if they leave the facility, it is a voluntary program, but it is their choice to leave.
Yeah.
We cannot help them. We cannot help them pack. We cannot help them with anything else besides a little resource card and say good luck.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So there's a policy, and you also have agency resources like vans to accommodate for that request that doesn't require. Okay, is there anyone that works in an agency where it's required that you drive people in your personal car? Raise your hand. I see Miriam. Miriam, do you want to elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, I work for Buckaloo Programs in Marin County.
I know Buckaloo.
Yeah, I guess they're really well known here in Marin County and Sonoma. And yeah, we transport members to doctor's appointments, grocery shopping, things like that. Not for cigarette buying or alcohol buying, or because they do request, oh, can you give me a ride to buy cigarettes? Or no, nothing like that. Pick up medications, things like that, of that nature.
Very specific interventions, driving people in the car, but required nonetheless.
Right.
Yeah.
Or if they have to go to ER, whatever,
Yeah.
emergencies. Yeah.
Chris Kuhn is your CEO. Huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
He
Tell
is.
him I said hello.
I will. He's an awesome guy.
Yeah. I think he's okay. But no, I love Chris. All right. So you see the nuance in this. A lot of stuff is going to come back default to what the agency expects of us. There are some things that are generally across the board forbidden, but most of them are much more nuanced than that. All right. So let's get back to this. So that's summarizes ethics. We've covered only member preference and ethics at this point. So hopefully that's hit home pretty clear. We're not going to spend much time on this. The key features to consider in this is that in peer support, and like Miriam was describing, which is more similar to Project Return than different, is I'm assuming, is we're out in the community with people, it's not restricted to an office. So we might meet with someone at their house in community college, at their job, at a restaurant, at a park, at a punk show, all these things. These might be things where we actually do most of our interactions with people. And so what that does is, my experience is that gives us actually better opportunities to make more meaningful relationships, or expedited in general, because we're meeting in more natural settings. Now, of course, when I go see my therapist every week, I sit in the same couch, she sits in the same chair, and things like that. It's much more confined or defined. And so it's just something to consider about the differences in the models, the way that we practice. Matthew.
Actually, I was just going to tell you about my therapist too, because I meet with her in a very clinical setting, in her office, chair to chair, but she was telling me about past times where she would go and meet clients out in the field, essentially. And she goes, I don't know if this is exactly it, but with what she said, it's like, if you meet them for at least 15 minutes, you provide them a service, you can bill their insurance, and that's okay.
Yeah. See, it's a formal, here's the thing where people get hung up on, and I really appreciate this, Matthew. It just goes back to what I keep trying to reference is a therapist meeting someone in the community. It's actually, in that spirit, is it's a formal intervention. So where people meet, some people might get really hung up on it has to happen here. And that is one perspective. And then there's other therapists, as an example, in private practice, that do nature therapy, where they meet with people at parks and take walks, and they're doing therapy. Again, those therapists are making a decision to do a specific type of approach, so neither of them are right or wrong. But if you get hired at the one practice where you do nature walks and you have an issue with it, you probably got to go work at the agency where they expect you to be in that office, period. We are going to move forward. I want to get through personal boundaries and limitations. So just keep that in mind. That's why many of these answers, remember, it depends. It just depends. There's a lot of variables. So here's where we talk about the third factor. This is our personal boundaries and limitations. So this is the level of comfort that we experience in acting in a certain way, right? This is about our comfort level or discomfort. Hopefully everyone has some limits, right? We have some boundaries. We have lines that we're uncomfortable crossing, hopefully. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. When I provided direct services, I'm much more permissive because there's not a lot of stuff that bothers me. But I would still say no to things. But it wasn't like, as a general no, I didn't have like many hardline, absolute no-go land. I was much more flexible and fluid, and I worked in an environment where that was like a thriving thing. Here's an important thing. Certain personal limits that we might have might actually be incompatible with the job I have. What do I mean with that? Well, I had a staff. She was a female staff, and we worked in the setting that I'm describing. I was her supervisor. We were required to be alone with the members everywhere in general. Every now and then we might buddy up because of a very specific reason. But I noticed on the front end, she constantly asked for backup. She felt uncomfortable. She felt unsafe. And initially, we would have staff buddy up with her. But after I noticed a pattern, I had conversations with her, like, I get it, you're uncomfortable, but we can't continue to accommodate your request to buddy up. Our model is to be one-to-one with rare exceptions. Your rare exceptions are being alone with the members. And so I'm simplifying an extended conversation that happened over months and months and months. And here's what the simple version was. At some point, you have to make a decision that you can either grow into the way we provide services, or you have to go to another agency where you're more comfortable with the way they provide services. That's a totally respectful thing, because we're not going to compromise our values as an organization to constantly accommodate for you. Does that make sense to people? And so it's okay. It's a reasonable question to ask. Desiree.
Yes, I don't know if it's if it's similar, but we work with SMI population, and it was I had brought up how we had to work with predators.
Yeah.
We had a sex offender, and it was very triggering for me. And I literally did not want to be honest. I did not want to work with him. I had no empathy for him. And I literally had to put it to the side. I had to be professional. And another coworker brought up the same thing. And we were told basically, you guys are working with this population, and you're gonna have to set aside your personal feelings about it, which I did. I mean, she didn't. She eventually left, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you for that, Desiree. And it's important, right, to acknowledge that I'm having a reaction, a response, a discomfort. And it sounds like you handled it well, which is to let your supervisor know, and then your supervisor handled it in the way that they thought best, which is, thank you. You got to get more comfortable, kind of thing. And supervisors are going to vary with that. Did I capture the essence of that, Desiree? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So having no limits can be equally problematic. So it's really this vacillation of limits. But remember, hopefully we're not setting limits without considering the member too. So this is the area that we're really concerned about, being mindful about, which is, it's our space, it's their space. It's that interplay between my space and your space that we're trying to pay attention to, or most aware of. Of course, we're going to have reactions to stuff. Of course, there's going to be some people that we find it very difficult to connect with and to help. Of course, that's going to happen. But it's not enough just to work with the people that we find it easy with. There are times that we have to really work hard at connecting with someone.
Can I add something to that?
Yes, very brief.
I think that in some circumstances, it's important, I just want to make sure I'm wording this right, to learn to, it's important to have boundaries, to have limits. And it's also important to know when we can remove boundaries too, because we are in the community, and, everyone comes from different place. And so sometimes if we go to the gym or we're at church, sometimes we do share that space, and sometimes people look deeper into things than what we may be aware of. So if we see someone, and unless someone so sometimes it's important to acknowledge that boundary as well, because you know, it's and to respect each other's boundaries, if you know, to have to communicate, because sometimes you know, if let's say I go to the gym and I see someone that, you know, you know, somebody it's kind of challenging to work with, and I'm working with them, and you know, how am I going to respond to that? I don't want to set a boundary, you know, in a personal space. I have to remember that it's their space, and it's, you know, so I think that that's important as well. And so
and I think, thank you, Annika, for that, because like what I've learned over the years is if we work and live in a community where there's a probability that we're going to run into the people we serve, there's a orientation that I would do, which is, hey, if I happen to run into you in the community, we're both out there in our natural habitat, just so you know, I'm not going to initiate contact with you. If you initiate contact with me, I will reciprocate the greeting. But I also want us to be aware of, I'm not going to yell across the supermarket aisle or the gym or something and say, hey, are you still going to your DBT? Or are you still, you know, I'm not going to disclose. I can't do that. Now, again, here's the distinction. Let's say we are in the community and we are talking about business. Well, we're going to be talking about business in a way that everyone can't hear. So you see the difference and the distinction in that? And again, my therapist in my community, I coach soccer. Her kid plays soccer. Every Saturday we'd be at the same fields. And so I would joke with her. I said, hey, when I see you Saturday, I'm going to yell that I'm still doing CBT across the field. And she would just laugh at me and she says, you're a fool. So, so again, these details matter. All right. So maintaining healthy boundaries. Again, hopefully we're not setting this just in isolation and negating all things member. We're trying to share this space together. So no one is immune from that. Maintaining a healthy self-awareness. What Desiree shared was an example of maintaining a healthy self-awareness. I am uncomfortable with this person, and I'm going to acknowledge that. I think it's important to not pretend, because when we pretend, we tend to operate and we make decisions that aren't great, and yet we're pretending like they're professional decisions, and they're really not. They're personal feelings. And so I find it's more important to be honest. Again, when in doubt, check it out, just like Desiree shared. And just like Annika was saying earlier, is if I'm unclear, if I'm unsure, I'm having some reaction, I want to share that, because A, I'm human, and B, I can't grow, I can't learn, I can't get more open if I'm not at least honest that this is how I'm feeling. And just because I'm feeling it doesn't make it right. It just means that I'm feeling it. Okay. So when in doubt, check it out and let our supervisor guide that. And that's our safest protection in many situations. Yolanda.
I just wanted to add also in reference to Desiree, thank you so much for sharing that. I think with every agency, it's important to know what's the population, because you do have the right to decide what population you will or will not work with. So that needs to be established early on. What is the population? Because then you don't even waste your time and apply, interview, or even be a part of that organization. You do have that choice as well as a peer support person, because there are certain populations I will not serve under no circumstances.
Yes.
So I don't even apply, approach, interview, and I want to know up front, what is that population?
Yep. And we're going to get to some of that also in the job role expectations, which is the jobs that we apply for or the jobs that we're held accountable to. Absolutely, Yolanda, that's a huge consideration. There are more organizations that I would not work for than I would work for. And the reason is if I work in an agency that's very rigid, I'm going to end up fired. And I don't like being fired. I hate the unemployment line. All right. So here, we're going to get ready. I'm going to put you in a breakout room. It's only for 4 minutes, but you don't need a lot of time. Remember earlier about a personal boundary, our limitations. What I want you to share with each other, very succinct, and there's only 3 people per room, is this. What's a boundary that you have that's either permissive or restrictive that also has a negative effect sometimes? I'm going to give you my example. I'm a hugger. I'm a hugger naturally. I'll hug everyone. I learned by working in this field that there's a lot of people that don't like hugs. And so though I'm naturally a hugger, it can have a negative effect on people that don't like hugging. Does that make sense to people? All right. So I'm going to get ready to send you to your rooms. You're going to think about a boundary that's either permissive or restrictive that also that could have a negative effect on others. You ready? Go to your rooms. I get to channel my inner dad. Oh, thank you. I think that was Helen. You were quick on that draw. So we're rounding home. We've got 45 something minutes and we're making good time. Okay, so we've covered member preference, we've covered ethics, we spent the most time on that, and we've covered personal boundaries / limitations. So we're going to talk now briefly about communication, how to communicate our yeses and nos or things to consider. Then we'll get into job role expectations. So in this model, it becomes really important to take ownership of our personal preferences too, right? And or professional requirements, and to communicate that in a respectful way. It's learning how to express our preferences, our limitations in that respectful manner. It's so critical to be honest with ourselves, coworkers, and members. Yesterday, we had talked a little bit in terms of building relationships about being authentic and things like that. I'm huge on being authentic, our authentic self. It does not make us right. It does not make us wrong. It just makes us self. And acknowledge that a personal preference, like we talked about, even hugging, which I see as positive, could also be a limitation for the other person. It can have a counter effect. And so I'm going to share a couple examples of where I've seen this go wrong, with the encouragement that maybe these are things that we can mitigate after this class. So I've had one staff in my career that in my supervision on a regular basis, their default position was, this is just who I am. And I'm going to tell you what I told them after a long period of time of hearing that. And I said, well, did you ever consider that just who you are isn't a good fit here? And what I meant with that person and what my goal was with everyone I supervise, because we're all human, we all have strengths, we all have areas for growth, was to help them grow into a more multi-dynamic person. Their biggest barrier was a refusal to adjust or accommodate for anybody else. And so that's why I said that to them. Here's another area where I've seen it go wrong, is where we are uncomfortable about something, but an agency requires it or gives us latitude, and we actually say no and we blame the agency. So like I had a staff and we used to set in a shared area. So all of us, I was the director, all of us would be in one team area. So members are coming in and out. We didn't operate by like appointment only. It was like literally people could be there every day. And a member had asked them for something, and I forget what it was, but the staff had told them, you know, I can't do that because the agency won't allow me. Well, after they got done with the interaction, I pulled the staff over to the side and I said, hey, I just want to let you know that your answer you gave to the member actually wasn't true. You could have done that. And I said, so I'm only sharing this with you because if you say that to another member and say that you can't because the agency, versus saying, I don't feel comfortable doing it, or I'm not okay with doing it, I said, I'm actually going to correct you in front of the member. And it would look something like this. That's not true. They can do it if they want. And I said, and no one wants that. And I said, and the reason I'm sharing this with you is so you become more comfortable taking ownership. What I expect of staff, and this is what I still tell staff at Project Return, is that I expect that you can communicate when asked why you did what you did. That's the most important thing. We might actually disagree with each other, and that's okay because I might do something different than you, but it doesn't make it right or wrong. I just want you to think through why you're doing what you're doing and be able to communicate that. What was the thought process behind? And you're going to see that in job role expectations. All right. We're not going to do this. We've already covered that. So here's the fourth factor, job role expectations. So this is what we get hired to do. These are questions, things to consider. Does this conversation, behavior, or the decision I'm making, do I believe that it supports the person receiving services? Now, notice in that, do I believe it will? And I'm going to refer again back to the Code of Ethics. Remember how I showed you how they were written, and you all have access to that documentation, is that a lot of it is like we respect, we encourage, we promote. It doesn't say we get it right all the time. So it requires some level, a huge level of daily decision making. So it's important to be able to describe why I think what I did would have been helpful, even if it wasn't, because it's not always going to be helpful. What does my job description say about my actions? If I'm hired to be an outreach worker and I'm uncomfortable doing outreach, I probably might not want to be an outreach worker, right? If I'm hired to be a peer supporter and to drive people around a lot and I'm uncomfortable driving people around a lot, well, maybe I need to look for a different job or get more comfortable driving people. Does that make sense to people? And that's a valid decision for all of us to make. What is the rehab value behind my actions? So I'm going to give you an example where a supervisor actually asked me to clarify, what the hell were you thinking with that? And remember that example I shared where I told the member, hey, you know you're an asshole when you drink and no one wants to be around. Now, there was a little bit more to that. I said, look, you're always welcome here. You just turn people off because you get so belligerent, and it's like, and people just don't like that. So my supervisor overheard that conversation and asked me hey, tell me about that. And I said, look, I wouldn't say that to most people, but the way that member and I have a relationship is they have said consistently that they want me to be very direct with them. They said, look, don't pretty it up. Just tell me what you think. And so my thought was, if I was very directive, it might give us an opening to have a deeper conversation. And my supervisor said, cool. But see how I was able to describe that. It wasn't just I was reacting. It was that I actually thought that this might be helpful. What are the goals of my actions? Am I trying to increase or decrease something? I'm going to give you another example. A member I was working with would come in all the time and just cuss everyone out. Point fingers, and everyone in the community in Long Beach knew this member because nobody wanted to help this member because they were a jerk to everyone. It didn't bother me. It literally didn't bother me. So one day I asked this member, I said, can we take a walk outside? And they said, yeah. We walked around the block and we were talking. I said, look, I get it. You're angry. I have been too. And it doesn't bother me. You could call me every name in the book. It doesn't bother me. I said, but most people find it very difficult to hear the underlying message when they're being cussed at and fingers pointed at and all this stuff. I said, so if you're willing, I'd be willing to help you learn how to manipulate the system to actually work to your benefit. That's literally what I said. And they agreed. And so what we did is over an extended period of time, every time they would come in cussing, I would sit down and talk with them. And I'd say, you know, I get it, you're angry. I said, but can I share with you another way that you could say that other people might hear more effectively? And they did. Over a period of time, it worked really well. I ended up hiring that person as an outreach worker because there was nobody that was a better advocate for people. They channeled their anger and frustration with the system, and boy, were they the best outreach workers. So what was I trying to decrease and increase? I was actually trying to decrease the opposition that the system had against this person by increasing their ability to communicate more effectively the same message, but in a way that was more palatable to people. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then I fired that person, but that was a whole different story. So am I comfortable providing services in the manner that my job requires? That's critical. And am I comfortable sharing what I did with my supervisor or coworkers? Either did or planning on doing. Here's a good clue that I might not be on good standing is if I don't want, I'm like, oh shit, I don't want to share that with anybody, right? That might be a clue that I might have slipped up a little bit. But it's important to be honest. I'm telling you, one more example of honesty that saved a staff. I had a staff come into my office really quick one day at the end of the day. I need to talk with you. All right. I need to let you know that I was dropping this female member off. And as we pulled up and I put the car in park, the female member leaned over and actually kissed me. And I'm like, oh, what did you do? I backed up. I hit my head against the window. I said, we got to go. And I came here and told you. Why was that important? The staff didn't get in trouble or lose their job because A, they didn't reciprocate the kiss. That would have been different. 2, they told me. It protected them because then it was like, so then we sat down with the member and reinforced like ethics and things, right? Does that make sense to people? Had I found out a different way, they would have lost their job because the presumption would have been that they were guilty. But because they were honest, because these things can happen, they will happen, but they were honest. All right. So any specific to job role expectations, any questions or comments?
I have a question if it's ethical. I'm just going to use myself as an example. I've been in treatment setting for 20 years. So I do have a lot of experience. And
Annika, just real quick though, is it specific to job? Because remember, not everything is ethical or not ethical. Is job role expectation? Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
So if I have experience and I go to my supervisor in a way that I would like to learn something with the experience so that I can grow, is that okay to do in a work setting with a supervisor? If I mean, I wouldn't say, maybe I have more experience in something, or maybe I would say this specifically, I have had more experience in, and I would like to be able to grow with the experience at this agency. And can you share with me how to do that? Or, would that be okay to ask for a supervisor? How would you take it? Because I think, some things you like to be kind of black and white about things, but how would you respond to that?
Wait, I like to be black and white or, oh no, you're on mute.
Just some things are, very clear. They're very unclear. So you're like to make sure that people understand what,
awesome.
Understand what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So is
Beautiful.
that inappropriate? Is that inappropriate to?
I think it's ideal. I actually think it's ideal. And the reason why I think it's ideal is it to me, it acknowledges a self-awareness that a staff has, that I have some strengths here Here's some other areas I'm trying to grow because I want to be better at my job. I actually think that is ideal. I love it when staff are like, I really want to grow in this area more, even if my baseline is good. I want to become a better communicator. I want to become more flexible. I want to, you know, whatever it is. I think it's ideal. And I would be, yes, there would probably be supervisors out there. Look at, there's going to be bad supervisors. There's going to be not bad. Well, there's some bad people, but it's rare. I find that most supervisors would embrace that and provide, you know, like guidance. Absolutely. I think that's wonderful. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Anyone else before we move on to the last factor? All right, all right, all right. That was my Matthew McConaughey. All right. So team treatment considerations. Again, these are all encouragements. Hopefully we're considering the member's current presentation. What we mean by that is how they show up. We all have a way that we show up that's generalizable, right? That it's like, oh, this is, you know, this is either someone's typically outgoing or maybe more relaxed or more quiet. It's like we're considering how someone's currently showing up. And also their history. I'm going to use hugs as an example. If I understand the person's current presentation, how they tend to show up, more clinically, people would call it a baseline. Has anyone ever heard that term? Yeah, it's how we tend to interact with the world. It's important to know that. And also know people's history. So there's some people I'm going to be very mindful and aware that there's certain things that have a negative impact, whether it has to do with me or not, it's still true. I want to consider that. We want to consider that. Okay, so you're going to hear a conflict with these two things, but a general guideline. I hate the rigid application of treatment plans and goals. I hate it. I disagree with it. And what I mean by that is, and I'm going to prove it real quick. Raise your hand if any of you set a goal and complete every goal in its entirety. Raise your hand. There's going to be a few. Most of us don't do that. And I would say I don't even know. I only know one person in my life that's ever been like, I said it, it is, no deviation. I've only known one person. And that person also was notorious for cutting everybody off after one perceived slight, right? So most people set goals, and we love to do treatment plans in our field. And then when a member deviates from it, we're not open to deviating with them. We're like, well, your treatment plan says, instead of coming back and say, hey, I've noticed that, is that still what you want to, a goal you still want to focus on? And here was my approach. I would tell people, you know, I noticed that that goal doesn't seem really important to you anymore. Is that true? Because honestly, I don't want to work on goals that you're not interested in. I'd actually rather work on goals that you are interested. And it's okay to set a goal, learn a couple things, and deviate, right? One of my favorite psychiatrists did not go to school to be a psychiatrist. They fell out of a certain aspect of med school and was like, oh shit, I think I'll be a psychiatrist. Best psychiatrist ever. My soccer teams that I coach, we want to win. I care about the process more. Does that make sense to people, that distinction? So this is one of those areas where I would encourage people to lighten up and circle back to check in if that's still their goal. Is that still important? And then modify it, because that's the human nature. What stage is the member at with me or the team? Remember how I had shared with you with new members, I almost always will do a lot more for. But doing a lot for over extended periods of time decreases them doing more, right? So I don't have a timeline, but what I like to orient members to is, as we get to know each other, I'm going to be doing more for you and with you, because it's really good opportunities to get to know each other. But as you grow in your recovery, I'm going to decrease how much I'm doing. Right. And so I just want you to know, but again, I'm not going to surprise you. I'm not going to like, oh, you know, it's going to be this interflexion. It's going to be a interpersonal dynamic between us, that as I see you capable of more, I'm going to decrease the amount that I'm doing to honor your recovery. And then again, what behaviors are we trying to increase or decrease? Now, my final story related to team treatment considerations is this. We had a member that grew up in institutions from a kid all the way into early adulthood, and then came to our agency, which is our organization was based on helping people live successfully in the community through independent living and jobs and college and things like that. And so this person just grew up in institutions. They didn't know how to hug. And what I mean is every staff would start to report feeling very uncomfortable, even with handshakes with this person. Has anyone ever had a handshake or a hug and you're all like, ooh, that felt a little icky? Yeah, everyone felt it with this person. So we started talking about it in our team meeting and we're like, huh, there's a pattern. Let's pull the member in, a couple of us, and let's talk with the member. And we let the member know in a very respectful way, like, look, we get it. Everybody, you know, people like to handshake and hug. We just need to be honest with you that a lot of people are uncomfortable because of the way because they would do that handshake where you would handshake and they would scratch your palm even. And so we sat down and we said, we're not going to hug you for now. We're going to start back with handshakes. We're going to teach you how to do handshakes. As handshakes get consistent, then we'll move back up to hugs. Good news is we got back to hugs. But the person, it wasn't their fault. They were just institutionalized. They didn't know. And so we had a very respectful team intervention with them. So does that make sense to people? Yeah. All right. So this is one of the slides that I would encourage you, if this model makes sense, because I want to recap a few things about this model. I'm not here to teach you what to think. I'm not here today to teach you how to act. This whole framework is to give you a model, a framework to walk through in your head like a mental Rolodex that incorporates all 5 factors into our decision making. So this could be one slide that you use with you. And here's how it works again. The member comes in and has a request for something. Hey, will you take me to buy alcohol? The first thing we ask ourselves, well, shit, is our agency okay with that? Is there something in the code of ethics that says you don't do that? And if the answer is the agency's against it, that's a simple one. I can't take you to get alcohol. Decisions made, communicated respectfully. You get past ethics where whatever they're asking is permissive at your agency, then you can ask yourself, am I comfortable doing it? And then the second part of with the personal boundaries and limitations is I might not be comfortable doing it, but maybe I can work to increase my comfort level doing that. Does that make sense how that works? Good. And then the other part is role expectations. Again, it's like, what am I hired to do? And what are the lines that my supervisor might draw to help me make these decisions? Sometimes supervisors are more rigid than others. In the environments I've worked the most in, we were generalist. One staff would do housing, employment, benefits, all things. That was our scope of practice. We were generalists. We did it all. Some of us were better at certain aspects than others, but nonetheless, it was reasonable that one person we'd be helping with a benefits like Social Security application, while another one we're helping put together a resume and apply for jobs, and another member we're helping them find housing. That's one staff doing all things. Now at other agencies, your role is this. That's what we expect. So we're considering that And then there's those rare moments where the team circles the wagons around a specific direction. Okay, Annika.
Is there a ratio where you work and what you've seen, just a kind of a common ratio of peers with members?
You mean a number of members per assigned to one peer?
Yes.
Yeah.
And for treatment teams as well. Is there a general ratio?
No, not really. I mean, in one model, we had 25 to 1, which I always thought was rather high. But in our homeless drop-in center program, as an example, we served thousands of people. And so we had a huge, but we worked as a shared team. We didn't do assigned because of that, to circumvent. We wanted all staff to be comfortable working with most members. But in some models, the agencies will have some variation of like up to a certain number. Like, for example, let me ask other people, who has like a limit? Who knows maybe I don't like call it in a caseload, but a member roster ratio. Janet, do you all have a ratio?
For my field, no.
Yeah.
Just because the clinicians, any clinician that we have here, they're 8 to a person, and we have
Yeah.
4 clinicians. We take up to 16, but that's as many people as we can hold, essentially.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So there's like one more definitive answer. Desiree, you guys have
No, we don't have a cap.
Yeah.
We serve, I think right now we have over 680 clients and still counting. So
Yeah.
we just get them as they need assistance.
Yeah. So that's a good question, Annika. Very good question. So some organizations, depending upon the program, will have some kind of like ceiling limitations, while others are more fluid, and it's like just whoever's present, and like things like that. Yeah, good question. All right, so here's what we're going to do, wonderful peoples, as we round home. I'm going to call on you again. I'm going to read the vignette, the simple version of it. And then I want us to walk through this. So remember, if you look at these vignettes, this is what I want you to keep in mind, is some vignettes, the decision that we make will be exclusively based on ethics. What do we mean by that? What we mean is the system doesn't give a shit how I feel. If I do this, I'm in trouble. Does that make sense? There's very few situations that fall into that category, though. Very few, but they exist. Now, in other situations, that what is permissive at one agency, ethics, might be forbidden at another. So remember, it's not okay to say, oh, that's unethical. What's important to add is that's unethical at this agency, but permissive at this other. Does that make sense? And how that language is important. So we remove this oversimplification of things. Now, given most situations, we're going to consider ethics, and then I might make a decision based on personal boundaries, what I'm comfortable. I'm going to give an example of that. At programs I've managed, there were times that a member would come in and request assistance with an abortion. We would always on the team have some staff that would find it very uncomfortable to support a member getting an abortion. And I was fine with that, because my statement to the staff would be, if not you, then who? Because someone on the team is going to support them. So I can respect that you're uncomfortable, fine. But again, there's a balance in that. If someone's always or most of the time uncomfortable with the way we're providing services, which is the role expectations, that might be a clue that I'm working at a place that doesn't match me. And then again, member preference. We want to consider that as much as possible. And then team treatment considerations. So you could see how when we're presenting with a situation, how we decide how to act, there's going to be sometimes one factor or a multitude of factors, but that's why it's important to think this through. So I'm going to call on people. In this vignette, Franco, the member, expresses an attraction to the staff and wants to date the staff. So, which factor would we use to decide on how to act? And let me pick someone here. Is it Christopher? I'm looking down here. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, you said it correctly.
Perfect. So which factor or factors should we use in deciding whether or not we reciprocate and date the member?
Ethics.
Bingo. You get the gold star. The reason I want to clarify, the reason is because even if I found myself attracted to the member, if I want to keep my job and I want to be in good standing, I'm going to make the decision from the ethical standpoint, right? Okay. So then, Christopher, if you like, or anyone else, how do I communicate that to the member?
That one's a little bit tougher.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It is.
You could be straightforward about it, but I'm not sure it's going to be received well.
This one is dicey. Thank you for that, Christopher. Yes. Matthew.
First, I just start by explaining company policy. Absolutely cannot date. Like, please don't take it personal. You're a nice person. And then I would follow it up too, like, hey, you seem like you care about me, so you'd want me to keep my job, correct? So, I mean, it's just a line we can't cross, unfortunately.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. I like that. One more, Carlos.
I would think I would meet them where they're at. So depending how the individual is, how I've seen them after, because I already have built some kind of report. How will they receive the information? And if I feel it can be a little, like Matthew said, take it a little bit, maybe not as friendly, maybe bringing a coworker. Like, hey, just want to let you know that yes, you're right, company policy. And as much as I appreciate as a human being, I can't be reciprocated because I do love my job. But just for protection matters.
Yeah.
Bringing someone else as a support or basically testify.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I've encountered this, believe it or not. I've had people express an attraction to me, and the key feature is I set that ethical we don't date the people we serve. It's an ethical violation, but your feelings are perfectly natural. They occur in people. The key feature beyond setting the no was I wanted to not shame the person. Because we've all been attracted, most people have been attracted to someone that didn't reciprocate it, and shame and guilt and all that stuff just wasn't helpful. So then I would had an extended conversation with them. All right, vignette 2. They bring a gift, a charm, and food. So which factor or factors are we using? And let me look around here. We've got Carla. What say you, Carla? Which factor or factors do we use to communicate our response? I don't think the unmute is working. All right, let me go to Bianca. Which factor, Bianca, do you feel is, or factors, is best to use with gift giving?
Maybe the boundaries and limitations.
Okay.
But
go ahead.
But also maybe it can be a policy where we can take gifts, but in this specific case, the charm bracelet is specifically for me. I'll put myself in the scenario. So it's a personal gift. So I think that's what kind of will draw the line for me.
Yeah.
You're bringing something else for the team, but also something catered to me, which that maybe I might handle it as I appreciate, the gesture, but the tray of snacks, I guess, is okay for the whole staff, but maybe keeping it like that, so that there's no confusion between the separation of the team and our relationship.
Very cool. Thank you for that, Bianca. So there's a distinction between the actual bracelet and the food. My deal, I'm Italian, man. Take the food and take the cannolis and leave the gun, kind of thing. Yeah, and this would be a combo, because at an agency where we have policies about gift giving, so that would be the default kind of response. If we have a policy like Jonathan, I think, was saying earlier, we don't accept gifts, but we do consider all these other things too. So we would communicate that. But in an agency where we can't accept gifts, it doesn't mean we're required to accept gifts. It still comes down to how we communicate it. Thank you for the nuance in that, Bianca. Appreciate it. All right. Okay, so vignette 3. A member's asking if you believe in God and go to church. So let me pick someone new here. Justin, which factor or factors would be your best guess and how to respond?
I would say just like personal boundaries and limitations, maybe,
Yeah.
What I'm comfortable sharing about myself, in terms of that.
Yeah.
That's how I would look at it,
Yeah. So what you're going to ask yourself before you answer the question is your own comfort level in what to say, how to say it in either direction.
I mean, I'd probably ask myself, how is this going to help the client, by me sharing this about myself? Is this going to, benefit the client? And I would weigh it, you know what I mean? I'd weigh it right there. I've worked in this setting for a while, and a lot of times it's just instinct, you got to kind of weigh those things, right? And you just know, okay, this is a good time to maybe share that, and maybe, it just depends.
Yep. I really like that, Justin, and I want everyone to kind of really hear this. So make sure if I get it wrong, Justin, is that like we are many times making judgment calls. And even if we get it what someone might consider wrong or incorrect or whatever, it's not a huge deal. We can always course correct. But we're asking ourselves, answering this question or not answering this question, do I think it would be helpful to the person? And that's where, if we get it wrong, whatever the hell wrong is, we can course correct because we at least thought it through.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, Justin. Very thoughtful. And around religion and spirituality, just so you all know, because I've been, like I said, I'm a dinosaur in this field now. It seems like more than half my life. Is earlier on that was considered taboo. And we actually helped write a policy for a larger organization around giving people permission to talk about spirituality and religion because it's so prominent for many people. The key feature was we don't, what's that word? I can never say it. We don't try to convert people or convince into one way, but it's okay to have the conversation. Because in mental health, it was considered taboo at one point. All right. So here's one. Steve is a single father of a 5-year-old and is homeless. He refuses to take psych meds, but uses marijuana every day for his self-reported mental health diagnosis. The team is considering making a report of child neglect. So, Stephanie, which factor or factors are you considering, and what do you think about the best responses, or what are you concerned about?
Me?
Yeah. Sorry, Stephanie Cohen. Sorry.
I don't know. This one's a tough one. I don't know. Member preferences. I know there's a lot of people out there that smoke marijuana and that they hold jobs, they're good parents. So I would say member preference. I don't think there should be, unless if they're endangering the child. That's what I would say, but I think it's the member's preference.
Awesome. So have you been watching me at my house or something? Because I got kids. I smoke the marijuana. No, I just thought you were trying to tell everyone something. No.
That's funny.
So So what you're considering in this, and your statement is, just because someone uses marijuana, and I'm even going to add and or other drugs, that does not equal neglect or abuse. So that's one of the first thing you're considering, right? Did I capture that?
Yeah, well, that's marijuana now. If you want, I think the harder drugs is definitely a different scenario, but the marijuana, yeah, yes.
Okay. And so we would want to be judicious, if I understand what you're saying, about versus just jumping in and making a call because it's like, reefer madness. It's like, we got to have something more than just I think that marijuana use equals neglect. That's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that, Stephanie.
Yeah.
And stay out of my neighborhood. I don't like getting caught. So in this one, we had a staff that did this. And man, I was pissed. Because even though we're mandated reporters, I want to touch on that. Mandated reporter is an ethical situation, right? We're mandated to report suspicion of neglect and abuse. But here's what I want people to consider in that is just because I think it might be does not make it so. Just because someone is using drugs of all kinds, methamphetamines, cocaine, heroin, that does not equal neglect or abuse. Just because someone has a mental health diagnosis and experiencing symptoms does not necessarily mean it equals neglect or abuse. So where am I going with this? Is my experience is before we make a phone call, which can be irreversible for some people, right? They get lost, their kid gets in the system, and maybe it was unjustified or unwarranted, is we actually want to consult with our staff, our colleagues, our supervisor. That was actually a rule I had. Even with our psychiatrists, you cannot make a report without consulting with us first, period. And there were times that we had to report stuff, but most of the time it was just some bias, some moral judgment that a staff had that drugs equals neglect or abuse. And again, that's not necessarily true, right? Abuse and neglect can happen, and it might not even be related to drugs and alcohol. Here's the last thing. If everyone that was homeless and drinking and using drugs that had a kid was reportable, there'd be nobody trying to come in a goddamn shelter. Because why would you go to an organization to get assistance if what they were going to do was report you? Does that make sense to people? So again, just stuff to think about. All right. Vignette 5. I'm going to open this up. Let's see. No, I got who I'm going to pick. Brandon, I'm giving you a heads up. Brandon E. Which factor do we take the person to the medical marijuana shop to refill their prescription? Which factor or factors, and how would we respond, or could we respond?
Well, as someone coming from treatment in the past, that would be a side trip. So no, to me, it looks like I would question whether there was a policy on that. First off, if there was an agency policy on medical marijuana generally and how it's viewed. It's medical, it's pharmaceutical. What's in your role? Like, is that a part of your role? Are you even able to handle the aspects when it comes to medication too? Because that could play a role also. So role expectations, and then personal. I guess personal boundaries may play a role, but that's a place in which you could go beyond, like, and stretch yourself in order to meet the needs of your client.
Very thoughtful, Brandon. See, and I want to point out to everyone what I really love about what you did through that is you first started with ethics. What does the agency say about this? Now, I've worked at an agency where this was permissive. I actually have done it. I went with the member to the medical marijuana dispensary because it was perfectly reasonable within the framework of our agency. I've worked at another agency where it's like, oh man, I would have gotten deep trouble. So, and I've also worked with a lot of people that are in recovery themselves that regardless of what the agency feels, it's like, I just can't go to the dispensary. I'm not going to do that. I'm not okay with it. That's fine. Set that boundary then. So I really love how you took that content, the nuance to that. Thank you, Brandon. Very thoughtful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, vignette 6. You're at a beach outing with members, and one of the members is on a psych med that requires suntan lotion, and they ask you to put the lotion on them. So here's the deal. Do you put the lotion in the basket, Hector? That was my reference to Silence of the Lambs. Yeah.
Am I unmuted?
You're unmuted.
Okay. I don't think it's the ethical. I would put the lotion on the back of the person who needed the lotion, the suntan lotion.
Because of the contraindication with the because of the medication. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
something could happen. You know what I mean? If they don't have it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Hector, do you prefer Rudy or Hector?
Rudy.
Rudy. Okay. Sorry about that. Rudy.
No problem.
So these are all vignettes, by the way, that I was part of. That's why they're here. So we put the lotion on the person because our prescriber, our psychiatric nurse practitioner, said the ethical thing was to put the lotion on. Now, here's what we learned, though. Here's the cool thing. Bring the spray. It's less, it's more comfortable with the spray, right? We didn't do that prior to this. And after that, we always had the spray and, you know, it's like, but the key was our prescriber said, you guys will do this, period. That's the ethical way to be because it's a negative side effect of the meds. Bianca, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, yes. This actually reminded me of the one I answered last time because I feel like also gender has a lot to play in these type of ethical dilemmas where you have to really like judge scenario. Like I love jewelry. And I would probably struggle to say no, you know, but if it was like maybe from a guy who I feel has another intent like towards the gift, I'll probably make the judgment to not take it. But if it's from like a sweet lady who I have a connection with her, maybe I'll take it for that one time, but then make it clear. But also in this scenario, it's like that gender thing is also yeah.
Thank you, Bianca. And that's also something that Matthew brought up earlier, if I remember correctly, about that's that beautiful decision making again, that so we can move from this all or nothing. There are things to consider in our response. And so the other thing specific to what you were describing, Bianca, is we were in a big group setting. And so we made sure that there was plenty of eyes around. Again, we don't want to leave a perception that's not valid. So we had witnesses and everything like that. That's again, thinking through this stuff. Do I want it to be construed in a certain way? All right. The next one is a member wants to go to Rocky Horror Picture Show. For those of you that don't know Rocky Horror Picture Show, it happens at midnight on the weekends. So let's say that your agency is okay with staff doing something like that. How do we decide? Let me pick Julius. Do you go to the Rocky Horror Picture Show on a Saturday night?
I would say no.
Okay.
Just because of role expectations, personal boundaries, and it would just come off as like a date.
Okay, thank you. Now let's say, Julius, bear with me. Let's say your agency requires you, everyone, to do stuff outside of a 9 to 5 because it's actually you're technically getting paid. Well, not technically, you're getting paid. Would that change your mind in any way?
No, there's like no way for me to justify me going to a Rocky Horror Show with this person. I'd probably still say no. Just because my past job and my current one, I don't see it wouldn't be allowed.
Yeah. Okay, fair. So I went to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and the reason is at that agency we were required twice a month, bare minimum, to do activities with members outside of regular business hours. So like we had a staff that used to do a midnight coffee meeting for people that couldn't sleep at a donut shop. That was an example of a regular activity. And so this member, we went to the, me and another staff, it wasn't just me alone, we buddied up and went to the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And has anyone ever been to the Rocky Horror Picture Show? Real quick, raise your hand. Yeah. We auctioned them off and everything, Julia. Yeah.
In that case, then yeah, if it's, you say required, and then like they pushed it like that, maybe, then.
Yeah. So thank you. So here, I'm going to summarize because we are at 1 o'clock and I'm going to stop sharing. And then we'll keep the room open for a little bit of time if people have follow-up. So here's the deal. If this model resonates with you in terms of how to make decisions, then there's 2 slides above all that I would encourage people to hold on to. Either that first slide that defined each factor, or that last one that summarized each factor. The reason why is because with all these questions and comments that came up today, here's what I hope you got is I cannot tell you how to act, what to think, or what decisions to make because you don't work with me. You don't work for me. A lot of this is going to depend. It's going to depend on the agency, my job, what I'm allowed to do, what I'm required to do, what am I not allowed to do. These are all the things that come into decision making. When I started using this model, I kept that one slide. And when I was presenting with a situation, I would literally walk through it. And now I can do it in a matter of seconds, like when I'm presenting with something. And that's also why when people would ask me questions today, I can honestly say, well, it depends because I've worked at agencies that have very different approaches. And so that's going to be factored into what do I do. So hopefully today was helpful to people. And yeah, so that's where I pause. We'll hit pause on the recording.